Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Cannabis Regulation Commission meeting. Today is Thursday, September 16th, 2021. The time is 2:03 p.m. I am President Robert Ahn. I'll be chairing this meeting, and the following commissioners have also joined this meeting virtually via Zoom. We have Vice President Mason, Commissioners Mercado and Villa. DCR's Executive Director Kat Packer has also joined this meeting, along with members of the department and the City Attorney's Office. Before we move to the agenda, let me begin with some general instructions. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being conducted virtually via Zoom and is being live streamed on DCR's website. Individuals who wish to watch this meeting may do so by visiting cannabis.lacity.org and clicking the About menu item on the top. Under the About menu, click the Commission Meetings link, scroll down to the bottom of the Commission Meetings page to find the live stream. You can also listen to this meeting by calling council phone at 213-621-2489 or 818-904-9450 and selecting the number for this meeting. Members of the public who wish to offer public comment may call one of the two toll-free numbers, 877-853-5257 or 888-475-4499. Enter meeting ID 860-838-7310. These numbers can also be found on the agenda for this meeting. Agendas for today's meeting can be found on the department's website at cannabis.lacity.org and navigating to the commission page under the About menu. This meeting is being recorded. Therefore, we ask commissioners, staff, and members of the public to make sure you state your name clearly before you speak. The audio file will be posted online within 48 hours of the meeting. If you're on the Zoom call, when the item you wish to speak on is called, press *9 to get on the speaking queue. The Commission Executive Assistant will call out each speaker by the last 4 digits of their phone number to identify the caller. The caller will then be prompted to unmute themselves by dialing *6. If there are no other items you wish to speak on, you may disconnect from this call and view the meeting via the live stream or dial council phone to listen only. We will be following the agenda order today, and today's presentation to the Commission will be available on the DCR website within 2 business days from this meeting. We'll consider general public comment and single or multiple agenda items together. Therefore, you have 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute per item, with a maximum of 2 minutes for multiple items. We ask for you to speak we ask that the speaker state whether they are providing general public comment and or which other items they are speaking on before they begin to comment so that we can appropriately time the speakers. If the speaker does not specify which items they are speaking on, 1 minute will be provided. We'll have a maximum time of 1 hour dedicated to allow for the combined general comment and single or multiple agenda items. And with that, we'll go ahead and open general public comment and single or multiple agenda items. Speakers can address the Commission on non-agenda related items that are within the jurisdiction of the Commission, or provide public comment for items in today's agenda by dialing *9 on your phone. Commissioners and staff, please make sure to mute your microphones, and Ms. Treviso, please call the first speaker.
Caller with phone number ending in 7823. Please state your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Johnny Sage. I was providing general public comment.
Sure, you have 1 minute.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, as mentioned, my name is Johnny. I'm part of the Cannabis Equity Retailer Association. Sarah represents the Los Angeles social equity retailers that were invoiced as part of round 1 of phase 3. And I would like to thank the Commission and the DCR staff for all they have done to advance this program. Sarah's goal is to see LA's social equity program succeed and establish a thriving, equitable cannabis marketplace in the city. Recently, many of our members expressed significant concerns regarding an email we received from the DCR's licensing department indicating the deadline for equity applicants to submit a relocation request was by December 31st, 2021, potentially forcing us to abandon our licenses if we do not have a location by then. Over the past 2 years, social equity applicants in LA have been hamstrung by the COVID-19 pandemic, its eviction moratorium, and severe delays in this licensing process. To make matters worse, many of us have lost our investors, keeping us from securing a new property. One member shared a story with me of how she has gone through 37 properties and is yet to secure a new one. We are asking for the DCR to extend this deadline so it still allows the DCR to stake the flags of Phase 3 Round 1 applicants in time for Phase 3 Round 2 winners to begin their search. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Caller with phone number ending in 5886, please state your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Hello? Yes, hi, my name is Tigran Kachatrian. I wanted to make a general comment.
Sure, you have 1 minute.
I'm, like Johnny said from Sarah, I'm also calling for the email that we received from DCR. I do have a secured location. I'm not worried about myself, but I do have other friends that I have met through Phase 3 Round 1 who are very concerned and are having a really bad time finding a location. We've been really patient with this city for over 2 years. We waited so long for you guys, and it's not fair for you guys not to want to wait for the other people in the social equity program. Also, the DCR hasn't even updated their own map. So if you want to find a new location, we don't even know which locations are available because they never updated where other people have chosen already. So please update the map and give us more time and help them out. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. If you wish to make public comment, please dial *9. Caller with phone number ending in 5539, please state your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Lisa Slaughter, and I represent Cookies on Melrose. This is part of our ongoing communications with the community as well as this commission to update you on the efforts and cooperation coordination with the community and local law enforcement. Cannabis, because of cannabis retail and specifically because of its enhanced security features and top-of-the-line security cameras, which Cookies employs, can also be of great benefit in assisting law enforcement when it comes to tracking crimes in the neighborhood. Henderson Moore will also be speaking, who's head of security. We'll talk about LA, but as regarding West Hollywood, our neighbor, we were featured today about the positive comments made and feedback we received with Lieutenant Mulder and the Public Safety Commission of West Hollywood. If you can take a look at one of the front page news articles from WeHo dated today, you will see that Cookies has addressed one alleged complaint of an African-American who is a Cookies customer who apparently urinated on the sidewalk in West Hollywood. And we reviewed all the security footage to see if we could match the customer to anyone who had entered or even approached the store, and there was no connection. So again, we continue to respond and review our own security footage and make sure that we continue to be a neighbor, and that's a good neighbor, but also an asset to the community and especially to law enforcement. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing any feedback from the community, and our 800 number remains open. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone wishes to provide public comment, please dial *9. If anyone wishes to provide public comment, please dial *9. President On, I do not see anyone with a raised hand.
No other callers?
One last call. I see someone now.
All right.
Caller with phone number ending in 0655, please state your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello, my name is Henderson and I would like to speak general.
sure, you have 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Henderson Moore and I am the Director of Security Cookies Headquarters and oversee security for Cookies Melrose. I'm here to provide you with our monthly update on cookies in the community, and I'm pleased to report that once again, over the course of the past month, Cookies has not received any complaints from neighbors or law enforcement. We continue to post and publish our community liaison number for the community to reach out with concerns, send weekly emails to LAPD Senior Lead Officer DeAndre and West Hollywood Sheriff Lieutenant Mulder, seeking feedback on how we can assist law enforcement and whether they receive any neighborhood feedback. Officer DeAndre Danzler communicated to us that there have been no complaints and thanked us for the continued efforts. We continue to have our cleaning crew maintain the streets surrounding Cookies Melrose and debris-free, and we are debris-free, along with keeping our neighborhood local businesses street clean, and we'll continue to put forth all efforts to ensure we are a good neighbor. The level of our security and surveillance equipment is top-notch, top of the line, and on 24 hours, 7 days a week to ensure we keep the community safe. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone wishes to provide public comment, please dial *9. Okay, President On, I don't see anyone else with a raised hand.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. With that, I want to thank everyone for your public comments today. Both the general public comment agenda item and the single or multiple agenda item periods are now closed. Let's go to item number 1 on the agenda. Commissioners, you should have received an advance calendar in front of you with our future meeting dates. Please take a look and advise if there are any planned absences.
Commissioner On, I have no planned absences. This
Thank
is
you.
Commissioner Villa.
Thank you, Commissioner Villa. Anyone else?
It's Commissioner Mercado, none at this time.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have any. If anything does come up, please notify staff so that we can make appropriate accommodations. Moving on to approval of minutes. We were sent the minutes of August 19th for review. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Commissioner Villa. I move to approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Villa. We have a second.
Commissioner Mercado, I can second.
Thank you, Commissioner Mercado. Ms. Treviso, please call the roll.
Sure, Commissioner Villa, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Mercado, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice President Mason, how do you vote? Vice President Mason? She might not.
I don't see her on the
She was.
participant list.
She might have dropped. Okay, we'll move on. President On, how do you vote?
Aye.
The vote is 3-0 and the motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to commission announcements and updates. Commissioners, are there any announcements and updates you want to share?
This is Commissioner Villa. I have none at this time.
Okay. Anyone else?
Commissioner Mercado, same, none at this time.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to future agenda requests. Are there any future agenda requests at this time?
This is Commissioner Villa. I have no future agenda requests. The staff is arranging to respond to my prior request. And they've been very active in working on that. Thank you.
Okay, so you've been in communications on that
I have.
agenda? Okay, great. We'll get
So
ready
they're
for that.
working on it. So thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, if there's nothing else, let's move on to item number 2 of the agenda. This is the DCR communications update. Staff, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Commission President On. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I hope you and the public joining us today are safe and well. Next slide. Thank you. I will now continue with a summary of DCR activities since the last meeting of the Cannabis Regulation Commission. At the August 19th, 2021 Cannabis Regulation Commission meeting, in addition to providing a summary of DCR activities since the last meeting of the Cannabis Regulation Commission, DCR shared new information, including but not limited to licensing program to include updates regarding application and licensing processes, amendments to Articles 4 and 5 of Chapter 10 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code related to licensing and land use restrictions effective July 1st, 2021. Next slide. The Department of Cannabis Regulation is taking every precaution possible to prevent the spread of COVID-19 to help protect the health of our customers and staff, and in line with Mayor Garcetti's directives, DCR has implemented the following. Cannabis Regulation Commission meetings will be conducted virtually and telephonically until further notice. DCR's public service counter is currently closed. DCR is conducting virtual inspections, and DCR licensing and information services are still available online at cannabis.lacity.org or by phone at 213-978-0738. For more resources about COVID-19 in the city of Los Angeles, please visit corona-virus.la. In addition, on April 5th, 2021, the Department of Cannabis Regulation changed the operating hours of its licensing and information services, or virtual public counter. The virtual public counter is now available Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and closed on Fridays and holidays. Virtual public counter services include the operation of DCR's general phone lines and email systems. 3 to 4 DCR personnel will actively monitor DCR's main phone line during these new regular business hours to ensure coverage. If staff members are unavailable at the time of a call, calls will no longer be routed to the remaining members of the licensing team. DCR staff will return voicemail messages within 3 business days to callers who leave appropriate contact information, which includes a full name and phone number. We have made this operational change in order to dedicate more staff time to license application processes. As such, DCR staff will not be available to answer DCR's phone line nor respond to emails on Friday. Instead, on Fridays, licensing staff will be focused on license application processing, virtual inspections, and modification requests. Next slide. On Tuesday, April 20th, DCR launched Spark, an initiative that seeks to engage a diverse group of stakeholders via the collection of stakeholder comments, administration of stakeholder surveys, and administration of one-on-one stakeholder interviews and facilitated discussions. I'd now like to show a brief video prepared by MBI Media on the progress of Spark. Next slide. Please play.
Established in 2017, after the legalization of adult use cannabis at the state and local level, the Department of Cannabis Regulation, also referred to as DCR, is responsible for cannabis business licensing and advising the city on cannabis laws, policies, and programs. Through DCR's efforts, the city has begun, for the first time, to license and thereby legally authorize cannabis businesses' operations across the industry's supply chain, from indoor cultivation to retail and delivery. Furthermore, through the efforts led by DCR, the city is actively developing and implementing business and workforce programming available through the city's social equity program to promote equitable ownership and employment opportunities in the cannabis industry in order to decrease disparities in life outcomes for marginalized communities and to address the disproportionate impacts of the war on drugs in those communities. Though these efforts are underway, DCR recognizes that there are still many questions and concerns about cannabis in our community, and also recognizes that current laws about cannabis continue to have significant impacts on communities and issues that are important to communities like community health and safety, safe access to cannabis and cannabis products, and racial and economic equity. And these laws and policies continue to have wide-ranging impacts on Angelenos, especially on marginalized communities. This was the genesis of Spark, an initiative to get feedback from key and local stakeholders on issues that matter to and impact the LA community. Through Spark, DCR has been able to support and provide the community with access, resources, and knowledge about cannabis activity in the city of Los Angeles. Spark connected with members of the local community and stakeholders impacted by cannabis policy and those seeking to affect cannabis policy to gather feedback that will assist DCR in making stakeholder-informed recommendations to the Commission and the City Council regarding stakeholder-identified priorities.
On April 20th, 2021, the Department of Cannabis Regulation, also known as DCR, launched its Spark initiative. Spark seeks to support and provide access, resources, and knowledge to the local community and our stakeholders on everything cannabis policy and cannabis equity in the city of Los Angeles.
Spark can be categorized into 5 key phases: collecting feedback, analyzing feedback, creating a report that details stakeholder feedback, developing recommendations based on stakeholder feedback. Some recommendations may be able to be implemented by DCR and the CRC. Others may require action by City Council committees and city leadership. Now the stakeholder feedback has been collected, we are now finalizing our analysis of the feedback and drafting a report that will detail the Spark program and feedback received. Let's do a quick recap of what we've done so far. Spark launched on April 20th, 2021, with a blast of communications sent to stakeholders, the launch of a dedicated webpage on the DCR website, and opening of the Spark virtual meeting room. In addition, MBI Media organized a local media blitz including interviews with local stations, features on social media, and targeted communications sent from publishers. One component of Spark was the Spark Sessions. Spark Sessions were virtual events dedicated to a specific topic DCR was seeking community feedback on, including licensing and regulation, the social equity program, corporate social responsibility, and community impact. The first Spark session was held on April 28th, and the last was held on June 12th. 7 of the 8 Spark sessions included a stakeholder comment period, and the last 4 sessions included breakout rooms where stakeholders were able to communicate with each other, provide responses to direct prompts, and share recommendations which were chronicled on session whiteboards. More than 500 people attended the Spark sessions. The Spark campaign also included 4 surveys that stakeholders could take. These surveys were substantive and were specific to topics designated by DCR. These surveys will provide DCR with direct feedback from all participants on existing policies and programs and ways we can expand services and programs. About 200 surveys were taken throughout the campaign. Another way DCR received feedback from stakeholders during Spark was through the virtual meeting room's Spark comment box. The Spark comment box was a comment collection box that allowed members of the community and stakeholders to submit feedback to DCR. More than 125 responses were received through the comment box. Starting in July, MBI Media began hosting a series of one-on-one stakeholder interviews. These interviews were in-depth conversations with key cannabis policy and social equity stakeholders. Those interviewed included regulators for the state of California, regulators from other jurisdictions, local social equity applicants, and community-based organization leaders. As part of Spark, MBI will make available in the coming weeks a video that features the diverse voices of stakeholders participating in efforts to document the impact that cannabis policies have on communities and inform and shape cannabis policy reform at the local, state, and national level. By uplifting the voices of these stakeholders, DCR aims to center equity in its efforts to advise the city on cannabis policies and programs. Spark is providing DCR with valuable observations, assessments, and recommendations needed to draft policy recommendations that reflect the needs of stakeholders. some of the issues identified as most important to stakeholders included the following topics: licensing and regulation, social equity program eligibility and available resources, corporate social responsibility, community impact, department operations and resources, community reinvestment, tax rates and increased transparency regarding use of cannabis tax revenue, compliance, enforcement regarding unlicensed cannabis businesses, increased access to capital for social equity program participants, and increased transparency in license application processing procedures, accessibility of licensing assistance, license application processing timelines, expedited application processing, department communications, the establishment of a community and stakeholder working group, event licenses and on-site consumption, and providing additional social equity programming.
Spark is one way that community members and stakeholders can stay connected to the Department of Cannabis Regulation, or DCR. The other ways that you can stay connected to the department is through the DCR website, the DCR email list, and through different DCR initiatives such as the Social Equity Program and our licensing program. Thank you for participating in the Spark Initiative. We appreciate your feedback and your assistance in helping us shape the future of cannabis policy here in Los Angeles.
Established in 2017, after the legalization of adult use cannabis. Established in 2017.
Thank you.
after
Next
the
slide. Spark has allowed the department to engage with stakeholders in a variety of ways that were mentioned in the video. Throughout Spark, we saw 545 attendees across 8 Spark sessions, 230 comments during stakeholder comment periods and through the comment box, more than 200 Spark surveys taken, 55,836 stakeholders reached through our outreach on radio, social media, and through print placements, and 31,233 stakeholders engaged through our email outreach. Next slide. We'd like to reiterate, Spark has been categorized into 5 key phases: collecting feedback, analyzing feedback, creating a report that details stakeholder feedback, developing recommendations based on stakeholder feedback. Some recommendations may be able to be implemented by DCR and the Cannabis Regulation Commission. Others may require action by Los Angeles City leadership. We are currently in the creating a report that details the stakeholder feedback phase. Next slide. Please continue to stay connected with Spark and the development of the final report, final video, and recommendations via the following methods: the Spark virtual meeting room, our DCR website at cannabis.lacity.org, the DCR email list, the Spark email list, which is located on the Spark webpage, and through Cannabis Regulation Commission meetings. We look forward to presenting additional information about Spark, including the final report and video, at a future meeting. This concludes agenda item number 2. Next slide, please.
President On, do you have any questions, or do the commissioners want to address this agenda item by agenda item?
Yeah, no, the presentation looked great. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments specifically about this agenda item?
Commissioner Villa, I have none at this time.
Commissioner Mercado, no questions, just a comment. Again, I agree with you, President. It was great. The slide presentation was great and the video was fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have Vice President Mason back?
This is Vice President Mason.
Hi there.
Hi.
We got you back. All right, good.
Yeah.
You have any comments or questions?
I don't. I'm blown away. The video exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Yeah, I think just the important thing here is we just got to make sure that we get the input, we incorporate it, and then we have really action items that can follow. that really brings meaning to the presentation that we just saw. At the end of the day, this was an outlet for stakeholders and community to give us some additional feedback outside of this, outside of these commission hearings, and so we did that, and we just need to make sure that we are beginning to review, analyze, and implement wherever we can. So again, great job to the team. I know it took a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of resources for this, but really pleased with the final outcome.
Thank you so much, Commission President On. If I just may, very quickly, in relation to this Spark initiative, I'm very excited about our opportunity, both as a department and a commission, to respond to stakeholder feedback. We heard the itemized list of issues that stakeholders are interested in seeing the department, the commission, this city address comprehensively. And so I'm looking forward to engaging with this body, with our elected officials, and with stakeholders continuously to improve our existing policies and programs, and to shape the future of our programs. I do want to say thank you to my team, and special thank you to on behalf of the department. So I just wanted to welcome you all to this process, and look forward to engaging with you all. The expectation is that next month we would be able to share the report that details the feedback that we received. I'm sure you all will have lots of thoughts and recommendations on that feedback, and we want to work together this fall to put together recommendations, either that we can implement on our own because of the authority that the department and the commission have, or make recommendations to our leadership, both in City Council and the Mayor's office, to take some bold and courageous steps towards making our programs and policies more responsible and more equitable. So I look forward to working with this body on just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Packer. With that, we'll move to item number 3. This is the licensing report from DCR. Ms. Packer, are you ready?
I am. We can go to the next slide. So first, what I'd like to be able to do is to just start with a summary of some of the legislative activities that have been happening, primarily at the state and local level, but that are going to frame our licensing program moving forward. We shared this at previous commission meetings, but just to allow it to serve as a foundation for some of the information we're going to be sharing later on in the presentation, specifically as it relates to updated processes. A lot of these processes are reflective now of amendments that have been made at the state and local level. We know that our policies and programs have continued to evolve since our establishment, but there are some critical changes that are happening and that have happened already at the state and local level that are going to have significant impacts on our licensing program, our social equity program, and our market. And so I'll first kind of briefly summarize and describe those, and then my Assistant Executive Director, Jason Killeen, and I will go back and forth and sharing today's licensing report. So we had shared at the last commission meeting and previous commission meetings that the state has consolidated its cannabis licensing agencies into one agency, the Department of Cannabis Control. They have been sharing lots of information with the city and its stakeholders. So I would just encourage folks to, if you're signed up for our commission, our listserv, to make sure that you're signed up for their listserv as well. One of the kind of major components and requirements moving forward as it relates to kind of state and local licensing is that the state just recently created new deadlines as it relates to provisional licensing. We are working actively with our partners at the Department of Cannabis Control to make sure that we're responding proactively to these deadlines and have a plan that's going to allow both our existing applicants and licensees and future applicants and licensees be able to continue to exist in our process and program. So we will continue to share information with this body about those deadlines as they relate to the issuance of provisional licenses at the state level. Want to just quickly note that in addition to these deadlines, it's kind of fair to point that in addition to these deadlines that the state of California is mandating related to our provisional licenses, they are also making a grant available to several local jurisdictions. The city of Los Angeles could qualify for up to $22 million in grant funds that would be directly kind of purposed to help our applicants and licensees be able to renew their provisional licenses and meet the requirements to receive a state annual license. So we're actively working with the Department of Cannabis Control, both on implementing plans to allow us to more effectively meet these deadlines and also to utilize resources that may be made available. Next slide. There were several amendments changes made at the local level recently, and I'll walk through a few of them. First, on July 4th, there were amendments made to our cannabis procedures ordinance that removed the proof of deposit requirement for phase 3 retail round 1 applicants. Those amendments also extended the cannabis application renewal fee payment deadline for all applicants, specifically for calendar years 2019, 2020, and 2021 until July 31st of 2021. Also at the local level, City Council adopted significant amendments to our cannabis procedures ordinance in Article 4 and our cannabis location restrictions ordinance in Article 5 of Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code. I'll spend some time detailing those specific amendments today. Next slide. So we've shared this particular illustration with this body before, with the public before, but what I wanted to be able to do is to summarize some of the highlights of the amendments that City Council made. I won't sit here and read them, so we can go through these relatively quickly, but there were significant changes to the way that we verify location compliance, and we will spend time detailing that today, and also changes to our temporary approval and pre-application process. But all of this was adopted by City Council in June and became effective July 1. Next slide. Previous slide was detailing some of the changes to the cannabis procedures ordinance. This slide details some of the changes to the cannabis location restriction ordinance. This is just a brief summary. We'll detail these efforts later. I will articulate one thing here. The City Council did amend and extend the date for existing medical marijuana dispensaries to comply with their zoning distance and sensitive use restrictions until December 31st of 2025. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are these ordinance amendments that became effective on July 1. And they were recommended by DCR specifically to streamline our application process and to reduce timelines associated with the application process. I do want to use this as an opportunity to thank City Council and their leadership, particularly members of the Plum Committee and the Plum Committee Chair, Councilmember Harris Dawson, for working with our office to adopt these recommendations that were made by DCR to streamline the process and to allow us to have reduced timelines, because we articulated to our elected officials that in order for us to either be able to expedite the process without additional resources, additional staff, we were going to have to take a look at the process holistically and the requirements holistically and figure out exactly what our priorities were as it related to local control, and particularly in relation to the temporary approval process. And I say that in part because up until this point, the city has been administering a temporary approval process, not its annual licensing process, but because of some of the deadlines now being driven by state law, we are going to be in a position where we're going to need to implement our annual licensing process and program relatively soon. So it was going to be important for us, before we began new application processes that we know are going to require us to do kind of more detailed review of information, a more detailed inspection. We wanted to make sure that we had a simplified temporary approval process before we made plans with the state to implement our annual licensing process. And so much of today's presentation is going to focus on how those changes specifically are going to impact our temporary approval process and our pre-application process. Next slide. So we had communicated when these amendments became effective that we were going to take our licensing portal, at least some of the functionality of our licensing portal, offline. Namely, we have temporarily suspended the submission of new pre-applications until October 1st. We will be opening up the pre-application process on our licensing portal on October 1st. And my Assistant Executive Director, Jason Colleen, will detail that process a little bit later in the presentation. But part of the reason why we took the system offline was so we could make changes to our system to allow us to implement these new processes that were amended and adopted by City Council. And so part of what we're doing right now, what we've been working on over the course of the last several months, has been updating our internal processes, updating our workflows, all of the kind of public-facing information that made reference to old workflows, old processes, working with staff to make sure that they understand those processes. That's what's happening right now, all in anticipation of us launching these processes on October 1st. Because the ordinance itself became effective on July 1st, people who are already in our pipeline are already getting the benefit of these new processes. And so I want to kind of add that as a note, because although I'm sharing that these new processes will be available for the public, for kind of new applicants on October 1st, the reality is that this information that we're sharing about the pre-application process, about the temporary approval process, it is directly relevant to all of our existing operators, all of our existing applicants. Part of what we worked to do in streamlining the process was to make sure we kind of had a logic model that fit regardless of whether or not you were a phase 1 applicant or a phase 2 applicant or a phase 3 applicant, so that everyone is kind of following the same set of rules and processes. And so we've now been able to essentially line everyone up. So the information that we're sharing today is going to be important for everyone. We are working, as I said, right now on building new materials for the public, so that as these new processes are launched, folks understand how to navigate through them. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, today's presentation is really going to focus on the pre-application process, the temporary approval application process, modification requests. We won't focus today on PCM requests, but all of these processes were updated, amended due to City Council action back in July. Again, we're updating our portal, our internal procedures, our public information. Be on the lookout for updates to our website. Part of what we will be sharing for the first time today are our updated workflows for the pre-application review process and the temporary approval process. If you had visited our website recently, you would have seen that we had taken some of those materials offline so that we can update them. We will be sharing illustrations of those workflows today. We are working on updating all of our information and procedure bulletins and our video tutorials and other resources. And Dr. Brown will share information a little bit later about how some of our social equity program vendors are actually helping us to kind of simplify and make more accessible our information and resources. We'll go to the next slide. So for the rest of the licensing report, we're going to be sharing information primarily around our new pre-application requirements, processes, and anticipated timelines. We'll be doing the same thing for the temporary approval process and the modification process. As we frame the kind of development or the changes of the pre-application review process, I first wanted to be able to share with the public and the commission how our review of location compliance has changed over the course of the last several years. And part of the reason why I want to describe this evolution is because I want to be able to emphasize the impact that this change is going to have on our applicants. Essentially, by being able to have verified their location as compliant before they apply for temporary approval. This is going to go a long way for folks who maybe in the past had previous experiences where their location was determined to be compliant one day, but then a period of time lapsed and a sensitive use was created by a school or daycare or public park popping up. We've seen that happen a couple of times, but because you first will have to go through this pre-application review to determine location compliance. Pre-application review is all about location compliance now, but because you have to go through this pre-application review process before you're even allowed to apply for temporary approval, we want to spend time today, and we'll be making sure that our resources kind of reflect this change of process for how we're verifying location. So I'm going to pass things over. We'll stay on this slide, but I'm going to pass things over to Assistant Executive Director Jason Colleen to kind of walk us through the evolution of our city verifying location compliance and what those requirements are today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Jason Kleen, Assistant Executive Director over Licensing and Administration for the Department of Cannabis Regulation. I'm going to present kind of an evolution of the land use restrictions ordinance. As the director was explaining, the modifications that were made to Municipal Code Section 105 are going to be some of the most transformative changes that have been adopted by the mayor and city council since commercial cannabis regulation was authorized within the city. For the phase 1 applicants, which were brought in under Proposition M priority processing, their verification was done when we were making eligibility determinations. And those businesses had the opportunity to either comply with the Proposition M land use requirements, and if they did not comply with those Proposition M land use requirements, they had the ability to comply under the old Proposition D land use rules, and they were grandfathered in at their location for a period of time. Those rules only applied to phase 1, and phase 1 businesses were able to receive temporary approval when they paid their temporary approval application fees. So they came in, they had to meet one of 2 different land use requirements, and they immediately got a license as soon as they paid their temporary approval application fees. Those rules have not applied to anybody else. For the phase 2 applicants, when we began accepting applications, phase 2 applicants were expected to navigate through the entire annual application process, including environmental analysis, as well as meeting all of the city and state requirements to get an annual license before they would receive a license. So DCR worked with the mayor and city council to give those phase 2 applicants an opportunity to receive temporary approval. However, the land use restrictions ordinance was never updated to reflect the ability to receive a temporary approval license earlier in the process. And the land use procedures ordinance is really what held one DCR back from processing applications more expeditiously and efficiently, and 2 applicants from being able to stay at their preferred location as they navigated through the city's licensure process as well as the state's licensure process. Applications up until July 1st, 2021, there was an initial verification for land use compliance that was conducted either at the pre-application review stage or at the temporary approval application review stage. But DCR could not grant and or determine compliance with the land use ordinance until the applicant was eligible to receive a city license. And sensitive uses could knock out an applicant anytime before they received both a state license, which was a prerequisite to get a temporary approval from the city of Los Angeles, and that city of Los Angeles temporary approval license. So applicants that came in fall of 2018, if a school relocated across the street from them and they had not received temporary approval from the city, they would be notified prior to being eligible to receive a license that their location was no longer eligible, and in order to move forward in our process, they would have to relocate. With the law that went into effect on July 1st, not only did existing applicants that hadn't received temporary approval get the benefit of being eligible for a review for compliance based on the sensitive use data as it existed on July 1st of 2021, but new applicants are going to get the benefit of going through the revised pre-application review process to allow DCR to determine if the proposed business premises is compliant with both the Cannabis Procedures Ordinance and the Land Use Restrictions Ordinance. And if DCR determines that their proposed business premises location is eligible for further processing, they are locked in to that business premises location for up to 1 calendar year from the date that we make the eligibility finding. And then they'll have the opportunity to put together their business plans, secure the location, negotiate their lease, find co-owners, and submit a complete temporary approval application and move forward within our process without having to worry about a sensitive use or another business knocking them out of the process before they can actually receive their temporary approval. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest changes was once the land use procedures ordinance was updated, section 10403A was amended to limit the pre-application review to a determination of whether or not the proposed business premises location was compliant and eligible to navigate through the temporary approval application process. Next slide, please. There's 4 major land use considerations for any commercial cannabis activity. The first is the eligibility requirements that are listed under the Cannabis Procedures Ordinance, which is Municipal Code Section 10403A3, as well as the distancing from sensitive uses that are listed under Section 105, and the zoning for that is listed under Section 105. If applicable, commercial cannabis businesses with on-site retail sales also have to be distanced from other commercial cannabis businesses with on-site sales. Those are the 4 major land use considerations. Next slide, please. In terms of location eligibility requirements, the proposed business premises is ineligible if it's owned or managed by a person who holds office in any agency of the state of California or any political subdivisions, including the city, where that person's duties include enforcement or regulation of commercial cannabis activity. The proposed premises is ineligible if it was the site of illegal volatile cannabis manufacturing, as evidenced by a conviction for a period of 5 years. Next slide. The proposed business premises location is also ineligible if it was the site of distribution of cannabis to minors, as evidenced by a conviction for a period of 5 years, or if it was the site of illegal commercial cannabis activity after April 1st, 2018, as evidenced by a conviction, the site of a disconnection of utilities, or the site of a padlocking for a period of 5 years from the date of either the conviction, disconnection, or the padlocking. To address this issue, DCR has created a landowner attestation where the landowner or their agent of service has the ability to attest that the business premises would not be disqualified for any of these reasons. Next slide, please. In terms of distancing from, thank you. A proposed business premises location has to be distanced from certain sensitive uses. For activities with on-site retail sales, they have to be located outside of a 700-foot radius of a school, public park, public library, alcoholism or drug abuse recovery or treatment facility, daycare center, and or permanent supportive housing facility. In addition to named sensitive uses, they also have to be located more than 700 feet as measured exterior wall to exterior wall from any other licensed retail business with on-site sales. For businesses that do not engage in on-site sales, such as non-storefront delivery, distribution, cultivation, non-volatile manufacturing, and testing, they just have to be located outside of a 600-foot radius of any school. Volatile manufacturing has to be located outside of a 600-foot radius of the school, and it must be at least 200 feet away from any residentially zoned property within the city. Next slide. In terms of distancing from defined sensitive uses, Municipal Code Section 105 articulates various sensitive uses, and we've expanded it to include the agency that is responsible for maintaining that data set. So the California Department of Healthcare Services maintains a website which lists the alcoholism or drug abuse recovery or treatment facilities. The Department of Social Services has a list of daycare centers. The LA Public Library has on its website a list of public libraries. The Department of Recreation and Parks lists all of the public parks, aquatic centers, and recreation centers. The Department of Education has a website for all public and private schools. And the City of Los Angeles Open Data Portal has a list that is maintained by the Housing and Community Investment Department that lists the affordable housing projects that may be considered permanent supportive housing. So that list, in conjunction with the data sets that the Housing and Community Investment Department maintains for what amenities and on-site services are associated with each of those projects, in combination could be used to determine whether or not something rises to the level of being considered a sensitive use for permanent supportive housing. Next slide, please. Under the revised law, DCR is no longer required to retrieve data the day DCR is going to make a licensing determination. Under the new law, DCR is required to pull these data sets on a quarterly basis. So the data will be pulled on February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st. If any of those dates fall on a weekend or a holiday, DCR will pull a list the first business day after that date. The data being retrieved will be utilized for the quarter immediately preceding the date of the applicant's payment of either the pre-application review fee or the modification request form review fee, whichever is applicable. That date will determine which set of data and which list are used to determine land use compliance. As I mentioned previously, for any pending applications, under the old law, DCR was not able to determine compliance until a city and a state license were issued. However, in adopting the updated land use ordinance, the mayor and council gave DCR the authority to determine compliance based on the data sets that were in effect on the date the ordinance became effective. So DCR pulled data from all of these different agencies on July 1st of 2021. And over the last 2.5 months, we have been reviewing all 400 applications that were pending that did not have temporary approval for compliance against those data sets. And our licensing team have been diligently responding out to applicants, letting them know where they stand based on the revised law. Next slide, please. Municipal Code Section 105 lists the general zoning restrictions. DCR will be posting updates to its website, just summarizing the general zoning, such as residential, commercial, and manufacturing. In addition to general zoning restrictions, the code also articulates specific zoning restrictions for different community plan areas and specific plan areas within those community plan areas. For a list of that information, we would refer you back to either DCR's website or Municipal Code Section 10502. Next slide, please. In terms of distancing from other commercial cannabis businesses with on-site retail sales, one of the most difficult things in terms of one, reviewing pending temporary approval applications, and two, reviewing modification requests for business premises relocations was the fact that businesses were not able to be deemed compliant until they received a city and a state license for that commercial cannabis activity. So you can imagine that if a phase one business wanted to relocate down the street, not only did DCR have to initially review the location to determine if it was compliant at the point in time that we were looking at it, but once we made that eligibility determination, they weren't compliant at the location. They first had to navigate through the modification process and get DCR updated temporary approval documents. DCR had to determine that local compliance was underway such that the business could then apply to the state agencies to either amend a pending application or submit a new application for a provisional license. The state had to do their full review of that application. They had to make an affirmative licensing determination to say, yes, this business is eligible for a provisional license. Once the requester had that piece of paper, they would then provide DCR a copy with it, And then DCR would then finalize its review of either the modification or the temporary approval application. And then our land use review section had to then go and pull all of the data in and around that area to determine if that location was still compliant the day that DCR was ready to issue a license. That is why it has taken so long to issue temporary approvals and to process business relocation modification requests, because the code required so many different things in order for DCR to, one, issue a license, and two, to make the necessary finding of compliance with the land use ordinance. Again, that has all changed as of July 1st. So now I will turn it over to the director so that she can walk the commission through the updated pre-application review and temporary approval process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next slide. So before we even talked about the pre-application review, I wanted Jason to be able to kind of walk you through the evolution of the city's verification of location compliance, and then also just what types of things make a location either eligible or ineligible or compliant or non-compliant. And it's nice that we've modified the process such that we're only talking about location compliance and eligibility when we're talking about pre-application review. So part of what we want to kind of emphasize today, and we're making sure it's a kind of a mantra moving forward, just so folks understand, pre-application review today is only about location compliance. And we're using this as an opportunity to verify location compliance before folks apply for temporary approval. Again, we're specifically looking at location eligibility, distancing from sensitive uses, general zoning restrictions, and if you are a retail business with on-site sales, then distancing from other commercial cannabis businesses with retail sales. Next slide. Part of what I wanted to be able to do for members of the public in this body is to be able to show side by side how the pre-application requirements have changed. So what you're looking at on the left are the original pre-application requirements, on the right, the new pre-application requirements. The color differentiation that you're seeing on the left, what's in white are things that are still a part of the pre-application review process. The things that you see in yellow are items that we moved from the pre-application review process to the temporary approval process, and things that are represented in red, we no longer require for our pre-application process or our temporary approval process. Now, there are some circumstances during a land use review where if we need further information, we may ask folks for a dated radius map, but by and large, that's no longer going to be a requirement. So we're going from 11 named requirements just for pre-application review to 5. And really step number 1 is essentially submitting your application and going through the process. I'll actually walk you through now our updated workflows. We'll go to the next slide, please. So I spent time with my team, the department, over the course of the last several weeks, making sure that our processes are reflective of the ordinance as amended. This is our new pre-application review workflow. And I want to walk you step by step through what we hope is now a very simplified process. So the first step is for applicants to submit the information required for pre-application review through our licensing portal. Now, there's only 3 things that we need. We say submit information required. There's 3 different pieces of information that we need. We want to know the commercial cannabis activity or license type that folks intend to conduct at a particular location. We want to know the address, the site of the business premises location. And as Jason described, previously, we want to have a attestation from the land owner or their agent articulating that their business was not the site of or is not ineligible for the reasons that Jason described below. So 3 things. We basically need your activity, your address, and 1 form. And the first step would be for folks to submit that information through the licensing portal. Once that information is submitted to the department, a invoice will automatically be generated for the pre-application review fee, which is $597. Once we issue that invoice, the status of the application will be, or the status of the record will be waiting for payment. As with all of our invoices, and we don't have any discretion about this, this is mandated in the code, that invoice has to be paid within 30 days. The code mandates that all of our invoices be paid within 30 days. So folks will have 30 days from the date of that invoice to pay their fees. And then once that fee is paid, we consider the application to be filed. The application is not filed because someone submits information to us. It is only the combination of both submitting that information and paying the corresponding fee that allows us to consider the pre-application receipt. And the licensing portal record will be updated to pre-application received. That's how you know that it's at that point that we could begin working on your pre-application review to determine that your particular location was either eligible or ineligible. So once folks reach that status of pre-application received, DCR staff will review the location to determine compliance with our code. If the location does not comply, we will send a notification to the applicant notifying them that the location is ineligible. And if the applicant is interested in if that particular location is not eligible and the applicant wants to verify compliance of another location, they could simply start the process over and identify a new address, provide an attestation for the new address, and such and so forth. If the location is eligible and is compliant, we will update the record status to eligible for processing. And once you get to the status of eligible for processing, the pre-application review process is complete. This is essentially what you want. If you're interested in moving forward at a particular location, the status that you want at the end of the process is eligible for further processing. Now we'll walk folks through the temporary approval process next, because again, this pre-application review process is a prerequisite to apply for temporary approval. But part of what we're affording applicants moving forward, and the intention is to try and give folks a reasonable amount of time to get that application into us, but not an unlimited amount of time, because we don't want to determine that your location is compliant, one day and then you don't apply for temporary approval for 5 years. So what DCR is doing is we are going to afford applicants 1 year from the time that their status is updated to eligible for further processing to submit to the department all of the information that's required for a temporary approval application. And in subsequent slides, I will detail all the information that is required for a temporary approval application. But once you get to this green circle on this workflow, you have completed the pre-application review process. Next slide. So as I mentioned, during this pre-application review, we will review the location for eligibility and compliance. If you're ineligible, we will notify you that that particular location is ineligible for those particular activities. If you're interested, and submitting multiple addresses for pre-application review. You can go through that process subsequently and pay subsequent invoices to go through the location review. And again, just to reiterate, once a pre-application record status is eligible for further processing, that's the term of art, the applicant has completed the pre-application review process and is then authorized to proceed in the temporary approval application process. Next slide. Now I'll walk folks through, we just covered the pre-application review requirements, processes. I guess, can we go back a couple of slides? Can you show me the workflow again, please? So part of what I want to be able to share with this commission and members of the public are what we anticipate our processing timelines to be associated with our pre-application and temporary approval process. So we estimate, and this is an estimate, but we estimate that from the time that your pre-application is received, from the time that you're at that status to when you'd either receive a notification of location ineligibility or either receive that status of eligible for further processing, we estimate that that process should take on average no more than 30 days. And the reason why I articulate that is that folks have continued to kind of ask us to try and share information that allows the process to be more predictable for applicants and transparent. Part of the reason why we spent a lot of time looking at our workflows and our information and procedure bulletins, just to try and make sure that we're capturing every step in the process. But I did want to share with folks that it's our plan that from the time that you receive that status of the pre-application received, within 30 days, you should be able to either receive your notification of location ineligibility or have your status updated to eligible for further processing and thereby be authorized to submit a temporary approval application. Now, you're not required to immediately submit a temporary approval application. Again, this eligible for processing status is essentially going to be valid for a period of a year. But I did want to kind of go back and be able to articulate in particular where that time starts, because a lot of folks have asked us to express what we anticipate our timelines to be, but I want to note that it's not from that first box on here where they're submitting application. We're not saying from the time that they submit information to us to the time that it's eligible for further processing. We're saying from the time that the application is filed, meaning that we have all of the information that we need and corresponding fees have been paid for the service of review. Thank you for going back. We can now, thank you. So moving on to the temporary approval application requirements. I want to first walk folks through the requirements. I'm going to similarly walk folks through the workflow associated with the process, and then I'll hand things over to Jason to discuss some other licensing matters. But similar to the way that we try to streamline our pre-application review process, we've been very intentional about trying to figure out how we can more intentionally allow our temporary approval process to be streamlined. And so we've amended our process. The City Council has adopted amendments that are impacting the process such that these are the new temporary approval application requirements. And we'll be sharing in the coming weeks updated resources so that this information is even more readily available to our applicants and stakeholders. But first, folks will submit the required application information, pay the fee, similar to the pre-application review process. That's when that application is filed. Then after after we determine that the application is complete, applicants would be eligible to complete their initial inspection and go through the equity share review. I just wanted to summarize these first. We'll go through this process in detail now as we move to the next slide, which shows our updated workflows. So we're now looking at the new temporary approval workflow. And part of what I want to just kind of immediately point out to you is what you're not seeing on this workflow. And what you won't see on this workflow moving forward now is any reference to a state licensing process or getting a state license, or you won't see any specific reference to requiring a fire permit for temporary approval. And I want to reiterate this. I pass things over to Jason, though I am pointing out the fact that these requirements no longer exist for the purposes of the department issuing temporary approval. These requirements still exist for our applicants and operators. And so it is the applicant and or operator's responsibility to make sure that they are, one, aware of what other agencies permitting and processes may be, or legal requirements may be. We are working actively with different agencies to try and gather resources for our applicants and stakeholders and to make that information more accessible. But I have to make sure I'm emphasizing on the record and now continuously that although our local law no longer requires that these businesses, on condition of getting their temporary approval, meet these requirements. Our temporary approval itself does not waive or otherwise circumvent other city or state requirements or necessary permits from the city, state, or public agencies, including but not limited to a certificate of occupancy, permit, or authorization from the state. DCR may immediately suspend a temporary approval if an applicant is conducting or licensee is conducting commercial cannabis activity without all necessary permits, or if the applicant is conducting commercial cannabis activity without an active state license. So, although our process has been amended, other agencies' requirements and laws have not. We hope that this allows for a more streamlined process, as our process is no longer dependent on applicants getting through other processes, but you will hear DCR staff continue to articulate this caveat that our temporary approval does not waive. It never has, and it's not now waiving any other requirement under law. But now that I've made that point, I want to bring us back to the illustration that we're looking at, the temporary approval workflow. You will notice that this workflow picks up where the pre-application review workflow left off. Essentially, you're ending the pre-application review workflow at this status of eligible for processing. And the applicant or the department is going to afford our applicants no more than 1 calendar year to submit the information required to us for temporary approval. I'll detail specifically what that information is in a later slide. I want to quickly go through the overview of this workflow, and then we'll zoom in on some specific processes. After the applicant submits to the department through our licensing portal the information required, we would automatically issue a invoice for the activities or license types that the applicant applied to receive temporary authorization to engage in. And we're also going to send the applicant an email confirming their determination of eligibility. The applicant, of course, would have those 30 days for all of our invoices to pay their corresponding fees. And once that invoice is generated, their status is going to change from eligible for processing to waiting for payment. Once that invoice is paid, once corresponding invoices are paid, the status on the licensing portal will change to application received. DCR is not going to begin to review any applications for completeness until applicants reach the status of application received. It again goes back to this notion of applications being filed. And so your temporary approval application is not considered filed and won't be eligible for review until you receive the status of application received, which requires two things. That you submit the information that's required in the application, one, but then also two, that corresponding fees are paid in a timely fashion. After applicants receive or reach this status of application received, DCR will then begin to review the application. And we anticipate, this is another one of those areas where I want to try and describe what we anticipate our processing timelines to be. I anticipate from the time that folks get to the status of application received to the point where they get to temporarily approved, on average for that process to be approximately 90 days. And I'll zoom back out and talk to folks about this concept of completeness. So we need a complete application. We'll review to make sure that the applicant has submitted all of the forms that we need, that there aren't forms that are missing, that on the forms that are submitted, that all of the fields and information is required. And once we have all of the, once we verify that we have all of the information that we need, we would consider that to be a complete application. If after we determine that the application is received, after they reach that status, if we determine that the application is not complete, we will communicate any deficiencies to the applicant, and the applicant will be afforded the opportunity to submit additional information. Depending on the nature of the information submitted, or if it requires a review in its entirety, again, there may be additional fees associated with re-review, but we will allow applicants to submit additional information. Only if they're getting us that information within a year of us determining that they've reached the status of eligible for further processing. So assuming that we do have a complete application, it is at this point that we would change the application status in the portal to local compliance underway. We would also email the applicant at this point, confirming that their application was complete and articulating to them what their next steps are. Once folks reach this status of local compliance underway, this is the point where the state licensing process and our local licensing process do engage, because the state is still going to reach out to the local jurisdiction to verify whether or not the applicant is compliant with our program. And so we won't be telling the state that applicants are compliant until we have a complete application. And once folks reach this status of local compliance underway. So it's at this point when applicants reach the status that we would communicate. If the state reached out to us, we would say yes, the applicant has reached the status of local compliance underway. If the state had already reached out to us before folks had reached this status, we would reach back out and say the applicant has now reached a status of local compliance underway. But But in addition to kind of seeing the status in the licensing portal, we'll also send this email confirming that the application is complete and articulating next steps. Now, depending on whether or not you're a general applicant or a social equity applicant, you may have one or two next steps. Every applicant is going to have to pass their initial inspection before they are issued temporary approval. When we send this email letting folks know that their application is complete, that email will also include information letting the applicant know that they are eligible to request an initial inspection and giving them information on how to schedule that initial inspection. If we conduct the initial inspection and there are deficiencies or the applicant doesn't pass that inspection, folks would be afforded the opportunity to cure those deficiencies and request another inspection, but there may be fees associated with subsequent inspections. But everyone's going to have to go through the initial inspection before they get temporary approval. Now, I want to articulate that the initial inspection, the timing of the initial inspection is driven by the applicant, because there are some applicants who, at the same time that their application is complete, they are ready for an inspection. But there are some applicants who, although their application is complete, they may not be ready for an inspection. They may still have to go through build out or other processes. And so it's important to note on the record the timing of the initial inspection is going to be driven by the applicant. They are eligible to request an inspection so long as their status is local compliance underway, and staff will work with them to schedule inspections in a timely fashion. We're still conducting virtual inspections, and so it allows us to have increased capacity, but all applicants are going to have to go through that process. Now, if you are a social equity applicant, you have additional requirements associated with temporary approval. This is part of the reason why there are additional information that we need from you, namely information that allows us to verify that the entity that is going to be receiving a license meets the equity share requirements in the municipal code that are part of the social equity program. And so if you are a social equity applicant, in the email that's sent to you, applicants detailing that their application is complete and letting them know the instructions to request and schedule an initial inspection, that email is also going to include information letting folks know that at this point in the process, they are eligible for equity share review. DCR is not conducting equity share review or looking at any equity share review documents until we determine that we have a complete application. And part of the reason why it's important to make sure that we have a complete application is because there are certain forms and documents that we need while we're conducting the equity share review to be able to verify ownership of the entity that is going to be issued a license. And so if you are a social equity applicant, and actually all applicants will get the same email, but it's at that point that you are in the equity share review queue. I articulate this now because I recognize, one, that the process has been changing. And so there may have been a practice that was in practice months ago that's no longer in practice, but I want to clarify because I recognize that many social equity applicants think that we're looking at these equity share documents in advance of when we're actually looking at them. And I want to make sure that everyone is clear on what the process is going to be moving forward. It's after we determine that the application is complete. And you will have received an email confirming that you are at that step and that your application is in the queue for equity share review. I have some additional information that I'll share about the initial inspection and equity share review, but to kind of zoom back out again, after you are determined to be have a complete application, or potentially 2 steps, maybe 1 if you are not a social equity applicant. If you're not a social equity applicant, you need to pass your initial inspection, and you would your status would be updated to temporarily approved. You receive temporary approval, and if you are a social equity applicant, then you both need to pass your initial inspection and go through the process and have it be determined that the information that you submitted to the department is compliant with our equity share review process. But essentially, once you reach this status of temporarily approved, you have temporary authorization to engage in commercial cannabis activity. And again, I'm going to articulate on the record that temporary approval does not waive or otherwise circumvent other city or state requirements or necessary permits from the city, state, or other public agencies, including but not limited to a certificate of occupancy permit or authorization from the state. Next slide. So the first step in that workflow was submitting all of the required information. And what this slide seeks to do is to try and articulate what is all of the information that's required in a temporary approval application. So we'll go through it very quickly. There are several forms that have been updated on our website. All of these forms are now updated on our website. But the forms and documents are as follows. We need a landowner attestation, essentially acknowledging that commercial cannabis activity can take place at that location. We need a business premises diagram, a list of all primary personnel and owner, attestations from primary personnel and owners. We need an owner and financial interest holder form, a financial information form, an indemnification agreement, a labor peace agreement attestation, a attestation from the applicant regarding on-site alcohol and tobacco sales, a temporary approval attestation. If you are a social equity program participant, we also need from each of the owners the social equity program owner compliance attestation. The following requirements are not forms that the department provides, but describe information that the department needs from applicants. From all applicants, we're going to need an executed lease agreement, property deed, or other evidence of the legal right to occupy the space. We will need relevant business formation and organization documents specific to the type of business structure, and then specifically for social equity program participants in order to verify entity ownership. Applicants and licensees are required to provide equity share documents. It's described as including but not limited to all information, business records, and agreements necessary to demonstrate that the social equity individual applicant owns the minimum equity share required under our social equity program. So again, between the time that applicant would get their status eligible for processing through the pre-application review process, we need 1 year. We're giving applicants 1 year to get us this information. Step 1, submit a complete temporary approval application. Next slide. As I articulated, the next step in the process, once we determine that an application is complete, is this initial inspection. Step 2 is to schedule and pass your initial inspection. Again, once we determine that that application is complete, we will email the applicant, notify them that they are eligible to request an inspection, and DCR will also, in this email, provide instructions on how to request that inspection. There is an inspection checklist or worksheet that we have on our website that applicants can use to prepare for that initial inspection. It's the same checklist that our staff use when they're conducting their initial inspections. I mentioned previously, if you do not pass your initial inspection, you do have the ability to, in the time afforded to you by DCR, to keep us apprised of how you're progressing, either on build out or other circumstances, but to request additional inspections subject to the payment of inspection related fees. And as I mentioned, DCR is conducting virtual inspections, at least until further notice for these initial inspections. But that is the second step. First step, submit a complete temporary approval application. Second step, schedule and pass your initial inspection. If you are a non-social equity applicant, it's a two-step process. Next slide. If you are a social equity applicant, it's a three-step process because our program is centered around the ability for our equity applicants to have ownership of the entity that is being issued the license. And our team are working diligently to look through all of the different equity share documents and to make sure that the information agreements that are provided to the department are compliant with our municipal code. So once we determine that that application is complete again, it's at that point that an applicant is in the queue for equity share review, unlike the initial inspection, which is driven by the applicant. The timing of that is driven by the applicant. The equity share review is largely driven by the queue. It's going to depend on how many folks are in the queue for equity share review ahead of you. There's nothing that an applicant can essentially do to kind of drive that process, except that if we identify that we need additional information from the applicant about their equity share review, to provide that in a timely fashion. But we will let folks know when they're in that queue. That way folks are clear about when we're looking at those documents, when they may need to be on standby to respond to inquiries from the department about their equity share documents. Next slide. I want to use this as an opportunity to articulate that as a part of our equity share review process. If during the course of our review of the business information documents or contracts, agreements, all of the information that is supposed to be provided to us, if during the course of that review, we identify provisions that may violate the equity share requirements, we will identify and document those provisions that are of concern to us using what we call a equity share review correction sheet. This equity share review correction sheet is how the department provides feedback to applicants on the documents that we're looking through. What we do on the equity share correction sheet is essentially try to summarize provisions that we feel may violate the equity share requirements, and we also explain why we feel as though they violate the equity share requirements or ask for additional information. We essentially allow the applicant to say, to evidence to us that their documents are compliant. But we do use this equity share correction sheet. In practice, this is a very heavily used document because many folks do need to make changes to their agreements or documentation or information for us. And we will be launching additional resources to try and educate folks and make more accessible information about how we go through this equity share review process so that we're getting compliant documents on the front end. But what we've learned through practice is that many folks get to this process and we have seen provisions that we would consider to be predatory. We do consider to violate our equity share requirements, and we document those and we send those back to the applicant. And so applicants may find themselves in a situation where we've documented provisions that need to be modified or clarified, and it's in the applicant's best interest to get us their documents as quickly as possible. I also recognize that these are sometimes very kind of nuanced legal documents. You should take the time necessary to review what we're identifying, particularly social equity applicants, because we're doing this for primarily for the social equity applicants' benefit, trying to make sure that unconditional ownership, profits, voting control is not being extracted from the social equity applicant. But it's also the applicant's responsibility to provide us a response to the equity share correction sheet in a timely fashion. When we send out these correction sheets, the applicant is essentially out of our queue at that point. When the applicant responds and provides additional information in response to our equity share correction sheet, they enter back into the queue. What I can tell you today is that the kind of volume of the queue is going to change over time. And so there will be some times where there's a very quick turnaround and we may be able to pass documents back and forth a couple of times between applicants in a couple of weeks. But it's going to be important, particularly for those applicants who are interested in moving through the process quickly, to do their best to get us compliant documents the first time. But then also when we identify potential violations, to be prepared to respond to DCR staff so that you can get to the next step. And the intention is to, again, make sure that we're upholding the integrity of the social equity program, to make sure that the equity applicant has real equity ownership. I want to use this as an opportunity to also remind folks that we do have attorneys who can assist, particularly our phase 3 retail round 1 applicants as they're going through this process. We have our pro bono legal services partnership with LACBA, and really encourage folks, particularly as maybe if you're an applicant who's caught at this process, to try and utilize the resources that are being made available to you by the city, by DCR, to help you get through this process. But if we do identify violations, we'll document them, get them back to you. We've had many folks at this point who have gotten equity share correction sheets, made changes, gotten those changes back to us, and then subsequently received their temporary approval. But again, if you were a general applicant, largely a 2-step process. If you're a social equity applicant, now a 3-step process. We're still working on developing additional resources and collateral materials, working to organize workshops to take place all through the end of the calendar year to make sure that if folks need help filling out the forms or need further explanations of what the equity share review process looks like, or how are they supposed to interpret what's in an equity share correction sheet. All of these things are forthcoming, but what we wanted to be able to do today is to really just kind of detail how the process has been simplified and trying to explain how these changes are going to allow us to have a more streamlined process and have reduced timelines, which we articulated today, both for the pre-application review process and the temporary approval process. Next slide. Again, we will be uploading our workflows for the pre-app process and the temporary approval process within the next week, and providing additional resources. But this is the process that existing applicants are going through right now. If you're already in our pipeline, and if you are interested in applying for commercial cannabis license in October, on October 1st, or subsequently after we open the new process, these are the workflows that the department is going to be using. So we hope that folks utilize these, work with us to communicate to us what may need to have further clarification or explanation. If there are workflows that If you see something that doesn't quite make sense, let us know. We're actively committed to making sure that we have a process that's not only streamlined, but that is simple, or at least more simple for folks to understand. Next slide. And again, after you would complete those 2 or 3 steps, and we anticipate again that process on average take around 90 days. You would have a temporary license issued by the City of Los Angeles. It does not waive or otherwise circumvent other city or state requirements or necessary permits from any agency. And as such, I want to articulate we are building compliance programming as we speak to ensure that if we hear from our partner agencies at the local or state level that there are unpermitted activity, unlicensed activity, activity that is not compliant with local or state law, to suspend temporary approval. Next slide. All right, I will now pass things over to Assistant Executive Director Jason Killeen to walk us through the rest of the licensing report.
Thank you. And I just want to take a minute to build on what the director was saying a few minutes ago regarding the equity share review. As she mentioned, the Los Angeles County Bar Association is providing pro bono services to phase 3 retail round 1 applicants who may need assistance in navigating what the equity share requirements are or taking a look at provisions. What we have noticed is as we provide the initial correction sheet to prospective applicants, additional terms are being created like for sale provisions and other things that violate the equity share requirements, intended to kind of circumvent the corrections that DCR is reporting out and requesting. So anytime we're doing these equity share document reviews, we're doing a review of the document in its entirety all over again when corrections are submitted to us. We're not just looking to see whether or not the language that was addressed in the correction sheet has been updated. We're re-reviewing the entire agreement again to ensure that folks aren't trying to slip in new language like a for sale provision or something else that would also be a violation. We have caught on a number of occasions people sliding in new language that then results in a new correction sheet being issued, and folks are kind of getting into this circular pattern of getting a correction sheet, adding new language that violates, getting a new correction sheet, adding new language that violates, in order to get to the original intent that the original correction sheet was trying to address. So to the extent that folks think that by addressing one provision and sneaking in a different provision that circumvents the requirements and it's slipping past DCR in that executive or the equity share review, it's not going to work. So if social equity individual applicants are seeing correction sheets 2, 3, 4 times for various issues on different provisions, you may want to seek some of those pro bono services and speak with one of the LACPA attorneys to see why that language could be a conflict with 10420, as well as why their other investors or partners may be trying to slip in this language, which would be a circumvention of the requirements of 10420. And with that, I'm going to transition over to the modification requirement process. So effective September 1st, DCR rolled out a simpler, quicker way to submit modification request. Applicants are no longer required to register an intent to submit a modification request prior to having their DCR record updated to allow them to submit the modification request through the DCR licensing portal. Certain modification requests are limited to licensees based on the revised workflows. As the director mentioned, there's a lot of information that has shifted from the pre-application review phase into the temporary approval, and there's even some temporary approval requirements that are shifting to the annual application process. So the modification request workflow has been amended to basically reflect those changes to DCR's overall licensing process. And DCR has created a table which is posted on our website to help applicants and licensees understand what types of modification requests can be submitted throughout the various stages of the application process. And we will be supplementing that page with additional information. And you'll see some of these tables on the next set of slides. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So anytime a user navigates to the DCR licensing portal, they should notice a button that says submit a modification request. And you'll see this button even if you're not logged into the system. If you do not see this button, you probably have a different version of the web page stored in your browser cache, and you'll need to go into your browser history and clear out your cache and remove the cookies and then refresh the web page, and then you'll see the button. If you don't see this button, either on the login screen or once you're logged into the portal, you're not looking at the most current version of the DCR licensing portal, and you will need to clear out your browser so that it will load the most recent version of the portal. Next slide, please. So this is what applicants and licensees will see when they log into the portal. You'll still see the submit a modification request as well as other buttons to navigate around their accounts. Once they click on the modification request, it will actually take them into the modification record. Next slide. The first page of the modification request workflow requires the requester to enter a valid DCR record number. In order to navigate beyond this page, first, it has to be a valid record number. Second, the individual that's logged in attempting to submit the modification request, they need to be listed as a contact on the record. You can't submit a modification record to withdraw or cancel an application for one of your competitors. You have to be listed as a contact on the record to navigate beyond the screen. Next slide. If you are a contact and you have entered a valid DCR record number, the first screen you'll see is a list of the modification requests that can be submitted, and it's broken down into two parts. The first section, which is on the screen right now, shows modification requests that are applied to the existing temporary approval record. For these types of requests, DCR will now invoice you not only for the modification request review fee, as well as any additional fees that would be required to fully process your modification request. In addition to collecting all of the required fees, immediately after submission, DCR is also requesting all of the required documents and forms needed to fully process the modification request. By getting everything on the front end, that will give the analyst everything they need to fully process the modification request. So the elimination of the piecemealing of the filing the notice of intent, having the record updated, filling out the cover sheet, submitting just the cover sheet, having the analyst review that after the initial 542 fee has been paid, and then asking for additional documentation and getting, invoicing for the additional fees, that should save on average 60 to 90 days for this process. For modification requests that can be applied to the existing record, DCR anticipates that those requests will be either deemed eligible or ineligible within 30 days of the modification request being deemed filed, which happens after all of the required documents and forms have been uploaded, as well as the corresponding fees have been paid. Next slide, please. On the same screen, folks that have licenses will have an opportunity to select one modification request that would result in the creation of a new temporary approval application. For these requests and these requests only, DCR will only charge the $542 review fee and collect the necessary cover sheet as well as document needed to create the new temporary approval record. Anytime somebody is either relocating one or more of their activities to a new location, submitting an entity substitution, or doing a 100% ownership change, that will result in a new temporary approval record. Once DCR has determined that we have the initial forms executed by the appropriate parties to create the new record, DCR will notify the applicant that one, a new record has been generated and they have the opportunity to upload all of the required temporary approval documents to the new record, but DCR will also invoice any of the additional fees, whether it's for business premises relocation or the temporary approval application fees for 100% ownership changes and entity substitutions against the new record. Once the new record has been created, applicants have 30 days, which is set by ordinance, to pay the applicable fees, and they have 30 days to upload all of the required temporary approval documents to the new record. Failure to do one or both of those things will result in the modification request and the new temporary approval record being deemed abandoned. For business premises relocations only, the applicant will have 60 calendar days to submit a complete temporary approval application, because we want to afford folks additional time in order to negotiate and execute a lease for the proposed business premises location after it's been deemed eligible for further processing. What is important for folks who are pursuing a business premises relocation is the location is deemed compliant and a flag is planted at the point at which the business premises relocation fee is paid. So what we've noticed is a lot of our applicants like to wait until the final day to pay their invoices. That does not work in your favor if you're seeking a business premises relocation, because the flag and compliance is not determined until that fee is paid. So it is in their best interest to ensure that that fee gets paid as soon as possible once an invoice has been issued and the fees have been assessed against the new record. Next slide, please. Modification requests need to be submitted for each type of change requested. One of the deficiencies in the old process was DCR allowed folks to submit a cover sheet where people were checking a lot of boxes. Once they had submitted their modification request, if DCR was unable to fully process the modification request as submitted, that entire request is ineligible for further processing, which means that we would notify them which activities or requests were ineligible for further consideration and which ones would be eligible for further consideration if resubmitted through a new modification request. In order to streamline the process and get people to a quicker response as either eligible or ineligible, DCR is now requiring a separate modification request for each modification type requested. Applicants, after they submit one modification request, can immediately go back into the portal and submit additional modification requests that they may need to facilitate the types of changes that they want. If all of the required documents and forms are not uploaded at the time of submission, the record may be deemed incomplete and abandoned. If all applicable fees are not paid within 30 days, the modification record will be deemed abandoned. If the requested modification cannot be processed as submitted, or if any part of the modification request is ineligible for further processing, the entire modification request is deemed ineligible for further processing. A new modification request may be submitted for things that are eligible for further consideration. For modification requests applied to an existing temporary approval application, the requester must submit all required documentation and forms at the time the modification record is created, and an invoice for all applicable fees will be generated within minutes of submission. For modification requests that generate a new temporary approval application, the requester must submit all basic documentation and forms at the time the modification request is created and pay the initial review fee of $542. If the request is eligible for further processing, an invoice for all applicable fees will be generated when the new record is created. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of one of the additional tables that will be uploaded to our website soon. In order to facilitate the automation and the functionality within the portal, DCR has created a new data field for record milestone. And this basically tracks a record from the time it gets submitted all the way until the time an annual license is submitted and or it's eligible for a renewal application. When records are created, they don't have a milestone because they haven't been deemed filed. They're not deemed filed until all of the forms and the fees are paid. So for new records, once it's deemed filed, it will be updated to pre-application. At the pre-application process, all we're looking to do is determine compliance with the land use ordinance. We're no longer asking for the entity. We're no longer asking for individual owners. We're only focused on whether or not the proposed business premises location is compliant. If it's not compliant, the applicant can resubmit a new pre-application when they find a compliant location or would like us to review a new location. Otherwise, there's no changes that can be made from the record once a pre-application has been submitted. And most of the information required for the temporary approval process will be submitted, reviewed, and processed within 60 to 90 days of the point at which the temporary approval application is deemed filed. So we're not going to allow substantive changes to the temporary approval application until temporary approval is issued. Once the temporary approval application is filed, there's going to be a limited number of modification requests that can be submitted against that. The only exception to this rule is for phase 3 retail round 1 temporary approval applications, which are able to submit the full range of modification requests until the end of the calendar year. Once temporary approval is issued, licensees do have access to the full range of modification requests. Immediately after the temporary approval process, we will be able to begin moving people into the environmental review process. In the environmental review process, we're scoping your project. We're doing the review of your project as submitted. So again, we default back to the limited range of modification requests that can be submitted. Things like entity substitutions, 100% ownership changes, business premises relocations, those all result in the creation of a new temporary approval application. So they will not be accepted while we're reviewing the environmental analysis. Other things like adding activities, expanding the business premises beyond what's allowed in the code result in substantial changes to the project. Therefore, we would be unable to complete the environmental analysis, which is why we do not accept those modification requests at that point. Once the application has completed the environmental analysis, the full range of modifications will be accepted once the annual license application has been submitted. If it's something that's applied to the existing record, it's not a substantial change to the project. If it's something that results in the creation of a new record and they want to move forward with it, that record will then begin the temporary approval application process all over again. And of course, once an annual license is issued, things that can be modified will be modified, and things that result in the creation of a new temporary approval record will be reviewed through the temporary approval application process. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of the modification requests that can be submitted, which result in changes to the existing temporary approval record. You'll see the yellow column is marked as limited. So temporary approval applicants will have the ability to submit modifications for legal name changes and adding DBAs, adding other contact changes, updating the business premises diagram, removing cannabis activities from the record, or withdrawing and or withdrawing the application and or canceling previously issued temporary approval associated with that particular record. In terms of the full range of modifications, we have additionally ownership structure changes, whether it's general or social equity that are less than 100%, primary personnel changes, such as presidents, secretaries, CEOs, CFOs, those can be changed once a license has been issued. Owners can be removed once a license has been issued, and the social equity individual applicants can be removed once a license has been issued, provided that they're replaced with somebody else that also qualifies as a social equity individual applicant for the minimum equity shares required for that particular license type. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the modification request types that will result in a new temporary approval record. Ownership structures, anytime there's 100% change, that will be a new temporary approval application record. Social equity applicant ownership structure changes that are 100% cannot be processed for phase 3 retail round 1 applicants until temporary approval is granted. And the social equity individual applicant that was used to qualify for phase 3 retail round 1 must be replaced with a social equity individual applicant that qualifies for the same equity tier required for that particular social equity license type. For entity substitutions, whether it's all activities, some activities, or for phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, we'll be able to consider those. Because the entities are different, they're different taxpayers, it results in the creation of a new record. And that new record has to comply with all of the requirements of the code before temporary approval will be issued to the new entity. What we have received a number of requests for is folks are looking to assess individual license types to unique entities. One of the common things is they'll have the business address hyphen the activity hyphen LLC for one entity, and then they rinse and repeat basically for each of the license types that were previously authorized. In order to facilitate that type of modification request, 3 different entity substitution modifications would need to be submitted, one for each of the unique license types. That would result in 3 new temporary approval application records that will each move through their own temporary approval workflow. If the records are eligible for temporary approval, DCR will be able to issue temporary approval to the new entity based on the original modification request. And then of course, for relocations, folks have the ability to either relocate one or more of their commercial cannabis activities. The temporary approval application gets generated for the new location, and DCR will still have to do a new environmental analysis for those activities at the new location. So basically, anytime there's 100% ownership change, entity substitution, or a relocation, it will result in a new temporary approval application record, and applicants will have to navigate through that process before they get temporary approval to engage in those activities based on those modifications. Next slide, please. One of the things folks who have existing records in our system and folks that will be submitting new records after October 1st will notice is an updated DCR record number. DCR is in the process of updating existing record numbers. Folks that have temporary approval will naturally transition to the new record format as they submit their 2022 temporary approval application renewal. For folks that do not yet have temporary approval, DCR is phasing in different groups of applicants to the new record format. The first 2 characters of every record number will start with LA because we're the city of Los Angeles, and we can only license activities within the city. The next character will be reflective of the type of record, whether it's a general non-social equity record, P for records that navigated through the public convenience or necessity process where a finding of public convenience or necessity was necessary for DCR to accept and process a temporary approval application. S will be reflective of social equity records. These are license types and records that are subject to the provisions under Municipal Code Section 10420. And then T for testing records. The next 2 digits are the last 2 digits of the year in which the record applies. So folks that have temporary approval in 2021 are going to be submitting a record for 2022. Their new 2022 record will have 22 in that field. Records expire at the end of the calendar year for which temporary approval is issued, and a renewal record must be submitted if the licensee wants to continue operating the next calendar year. These records will be expiring after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st. If a renewal record has not been submitted, folks will not be able to engage in commercial cannabis activity until a new application has been submitted and temporary approval has been issued to the new application. As part of the automation, these record closeouts will be occurring automatically after 11:59 p.m. So it is important for everybody who has a 2021 license to timely submit their 2022 renewal application. If you don't, there's not going to be a 2022 record for DCR to work off of, which means that you will have to stop engaging in activity after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st until you, one, submit your renewal record, and two, receive temporary approval on that renewal record. The next 6 digits are associated with the phase and round and the record sequence number. That is what DCR refers to as the core number or the record number. On a go-forward basis, DCR will be, linking all of the records tied to that record sequence to that number. And we do not anticipate that that core number will change over time. So the goal is for that 6-digit number to always be reflective of that particular applicant or licensee as they navigate through the various stages of DCR's process. After the 6-digit number is a 2-digit location code. It's issued sequentially. So as folks transition to their 2022 renewal, they'll see a -01, which means that that's the first location that is on the record associated with the implementation of this process. If a relocation was submitted after they submit their renewal, when the temporary approval application record is created, it would have the same core number, but it will be a -02 for their second location. And that's how we're going to track relocations on a go-forward basis. Some of our phase 1 and our phase 2 applicants have gotten the opportunity to bifurcate their licenses under the revised code, and they're keeping some activities at their existing location and they're moving some activities to a new location. So the original core number and core application has now resulted in licenses being spread across 2 locations. So DCR is going to need to track it through those location numbers and then have that tracked back to the original application that resulted in the issuance of those licenses. The next 2 digits are going to be associated with entity changes. So anytime a record gets deprecated due to a change in the entity, we'll reflect those changes there. What we have noticed is some folks that have gone through the entity modification process and DCR has canceled the old temporary approval that was issued to the old entity and issued new temporary approval to the new entity. Some of those folks are continuing to attempt to renew their licenses with the state under the old entity. And if you attempt to do that, when the state reaches out to DCR, we will notify them that that entity for those activities are not in compliance. And that will ultimately result in the denial of the state renewal application. It is very important to make sure that the information that you're sharing both with the city and with the state is consistent. And material misrepresentations could result in adverse actions being taken against your temporary approval licenses. And then the last piece of the record number is the suffix. Pre-app is associated with records that are in the pre-application review process. APP is associated with records that are in the temporary approval application process. TMP is associated with records that have been issued temporary approval. LIC will be the suffix used for businesses that have received their annual licenses. REN will be associated with records that are going through a renewal process. Once the renewal has been accepted by the department and processed, the REN will convert to a TMP. And then of course, MOD is associated with modification records. Next slide, please. So I just want to briefly go through the types of activities that will become available to prospective applicants when the portal reopens on October 1st. We will begin accepting new pre-applications for delivery, distribution, manufacturing, and testing. As the director mentioned, we anticipate the average processing time will be 30 days or less for these new pre-application review records. DCR only provides services after the records are deemed filed, which means that the appropriate documents and forms have been submitted, as well as all applicable fees have been paid. So the 30 days will be from the point where the record is deemed filed, which comes after forms are submitted and fees are paid. Next slide, please. So for the commissioners and for our stakeholders, I do just want to give a brief overview of the different commercial cannabis activity types that are available. All of the types that are highlighted in yellow will be activities that would be available through the portal on October 1st. Depending on the activity type, you may have to be a social equity applicant in order to apply for those activities. For instance, non-storefront retailer delivery only or micro business delivery only are limited to social equity applicants. So on October 1st, social equity applicants will be able to apply for one of these delivery only types. These types allow somebody to sell cannabis goods to customers only through delivery. There is no on-site sales associated with these licenses. Next slide, please. Cultivation, in terms of the various grows that are indoor, are subject to findings of undue concentration. When the portal reopens on October 1st, cultivation specialty indoor, small indoor, and medium indoor will not be available. Those record types will not be made available until DCR finishes the reconciliation of the phase 2 records and has the ability to determine which of those phase 2 records have been issued temporary approval, because that will drive what the undue concentration looks like for various community plan areas, and that further drives how many license opportunities will be available throughout the rest of the city when we're able to start accepting pre-applications again for those activity types. So DCR does need to close out the phase 2 process, conclude its issuance of temporary approvals to the phase 2 applicants before we're going to be able to make the general cultivation activity types available, because it is subject to findings of undue concentration, and there are pending applications that have not resulted in the issuance of temporary approval yet. However, in the meantime, DCR will be making the nursery, which would allow cultivators that only grow clones, immature plants, seeds, or other types of cannabis used for propagation to get those license types. That is an activity that's not subject to a finding of undue concentration. And folks have asked us for the opportunity to issue the processor license type, which is used by cultivators that are only trimming, curing, drying, grading, packaging, or labeling cannabis goods. So they're not growing their own cannabis. They're basically taking plant byproducts that are cultivated under somebody else's license, and they're beginning to process it. So those two activities will be available beginning October 1st. Next slide, please. All of the non-volatile manufacturing types will be made available on October 1st. To date, DCR has only considered the full manufacturer level 1, which is equivalent to the state's type 6 manufacturing license, which allows people to use non-volatile solvents for extraction, use mechanical methods for extraction, make cannabis products through infusion. Infusion mixes cannabis extract or plant material with other ingredients to make a cannabis product, and package and label cannabis products. The manufacturer level 1 is the most robust of the non-volatile manufacturing types. And under that license type, folks can engage in any of the activities that would be allowed under the lower level activity types, which is why we had previously only made that one available, so that folks have the ability to engage in any of the non-volatile manufacturing types. What folks have requested is the ability to do something less than everything, because it may assist them in navigating through the fire department or building and safety process. Because what folks have expressed is, when those agencies are looking at the license type that would be authorized, they're looking at it from the perspective of, this business can do all of this stuff, and they want them to be able to be in a position to have a C of O or permits that would allow for all of those activities. Now, some of our folks are not applying or looking to do all of those activities. So we will be making available the standalone type in, which allows for the infusion of products. So somebody with a type in manufacturer license can make cannabis products through infusion, plus package and label those cannabis products. The type P license would only allow for the licensee to package and label the cannabis products. And then the type S manufacturing license would allow for the extract of cannabis using butter or cooking oils, make cannabis products through infusion, and package and label those cannabis products. So those will be 3 new subgroups of the non-volatile manufacturing type that would become available on October 1st. Next slide, please. Additionally, DCR will accept the full distribution pre-application, which allows the licensee to move cannabis and cannabis products between cultivation, manufacturing, or distribution premises, as well as move finished cannabis goods to retail premises, provide storage services for other licensees, and arrange for testing of cannabis goods. Alternatively, folks could apply for the distributor transport only, which would allow them to move cannabis and cannabis products between cultivation, manufacturing, or distribution premises. It's more limited in scope. And then, of course, testing laboratories have the opportunity to test cannabis goods prior to sale at a retailer. Testing laboratories must obtain and maintain their ISO IEC 17025 accreditation. A temporary approval license may be used while applicants are working towards their accreditation. They must evidence the fact that they've applied for the accreditation. They have to meet the requirements for the full temporary approval process, but once temporary approval is issued, they'll have the opportunity to utilize the license, provided they comply with all of the other requirements while they work towards ISO accreditation. Next slide, please. Now I'll transition to just giving everybody an update on where our licensing program is at. To date, DCR has issued temporary approval to 522 distinct entities operating at distinct business premise locations. Currently, we have pending temporary approval applications for 520 different locations. There are 111 pending pre-applications, and then we have 1 pending public convenience or necessity request that has been transmitted to the City Council for consideration. Next slide, please. Regarding phase 3 retail round 1, 84 of the 205 businesses have uploaded 1 or more temporary approval documents. 61 of the 84 have uploaded the minimum number of complete temporary approval documents to be deemed eligible for a status of local compliance underway, which means that they can start their state application process. 28 of the 61 have scheduled an initial DCR inspection. 26 of the 28 have passed their initial DCR inspection, and 19 of the businesses have actually received their temporary approval. A number of businesses are in the equity share review phase. And again, it is important for folks to understand what the requirements under 10420 are and to comply with correction sheets as soon as possible and not try to circumvent the requirements by adding new provisions which do not comply with 10420. As new applicants are coming in through the pre-application review process and getting into the temporary approval application process, it will be important for folks to structure their operating agreements and other business formation documents in such a way that they comply with 10420 on the front end of the process, because it will expedite the equity share review and allow applicants to move more expeditiously through the temporary approval process. Next slide, please. Finally, I'm just going to give some updates for specific pools of applicants and licensees. The first general update is associated with the 2022 renewal process. On September 2nd, DCR updated the records for over 500 businesses that have temporary approval. Those records were updated to a status as eligible for renewal. Again, all of the 2021 temporary approvals will expire after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st. Those records will automatically go to a status of expired license. So if folks would like to continue operating, it is important to submit your 2022 renewal application, pay your fees as soon as possible, and then work with your assigned analyst to get to a complete 2022 renewal application. To file a 2022 temporary approval renewal application, the licensee must create a 2022 temporary approval renewal application record within the DCR licensing portal. They'll have to submit all of the required pre-application and temporary approval application documents in the current document format, and they'll have to pay all applicable renewal fees. The modified code does allow for folks to submit late renewals subject to the payment of additional expedited services fees, which will cover the overtime costs to have staff process those on weekends and evenings outside of the normal business process. So to avoid having to pay the additional expedited services fees, please make sure that you submit your temporary approval renewal record and pay your associated 2022 temporary approval renewal fees by November 2nd. Additionally, it's very important for all of our existing licensees to submit all of the pre-application and temporary approval application documents in the current document format. Doing so will allow us to, one, get your 2022 temporary approval record to a status of temporarily approved, but two, it will position your record to enter the environmental renewal process in early 2022. And that's important because the state is updating their CEQA and land use requirements, which will go into effect in July of 2022. So we want to ensure that we have ample time to do our environmental analysis for all of the 2022 temporary approval records so that folks are well positioned to comply with all of the different state requirements as it relates to CEQA compliance. And those new requirements will kick in as of July 1st, 2022. So please get us the documents in the correct form and manner and work with your analysts so that we can begin the robust environmental analysis in early 2022 so we can make sure that you're in a position to comply with the state's requirements in July of 2022. Next slide, please. The next is just a reminder for our phase 2 applicants. Phase 2 applicants cannot assert limited immunity by operation of law under LAMC section 10408C. Phase 2 applicants that fail to obtain temporary approval by September 30th, 2021 may have their application deemed abandoned. Applicants that have not been granted temporary approval by September 30th shall upload all temporary approval documents to their DCR record by September 30th, 2021. The licensing team has reviewed all of the outstanding phase 2 temporary approval records. They've identified the deficiencies associated with those records. They've assessed the re-review fees for the missing or incomplete documents. Those invoices have already been uploaded to the associated phase 2 temporary approval records. It is important for folks to, one, submit the documents in the correct form and manner, and two, pay those additional re-review fees. If you fail to do one of those two things, it may result in the abandonment in the application. Documents do need to be submitted by September 30th. The applicable fees need to be paid within 30 days of the invoice being generated. The requirement for people to pay the fees within 30 days is set by code. If you fail to pay the fees in a timely manner, it will result in the abandonment of the record. The second thing is, if a modification request was approved between January 1st and September 30th of 2021, the applicant just needs to comply with the analyst requirements for getting to a complete temporary approval application. Of course, folks that had their modification request approved earlier in the calendar year have already been working with their analyst to get to a complete temporary approval application record. For folks that have their modification request deemed eligible for further process either in August or in September, will have the time provided to, one, get the modification request applied, whether it's applying it to the existing TA record or for folks that will get a new temporary approval record, We'll be generating those by the end of next week, and you'll have either 30 days to populate the new temporary approval record if it's an entity substitution or 100% ownership change, or if it's an approved business premises relocation, you'll have the 60 days to get to a complete temporary approval record. If you miss those processing milestones, the application may still be deemed abandoned because you failed to comply with the processing requirements. And then 3, if folks have a pending modification request submitted by September 30th, DCR will finish reviewing those requests. And then, of course, if it's eligible for further processing, then DCR will do what is necessary and give folks the appropriate 30 days to update their records to reflect those changes. However, if those modification requests are deemed ineligible, the modification record is closed out and we default back to processing the temporary approval application record as submitted. So as I previously mentioned, analysts have already identified deficiencies in pending phase 2 temporary approval records. They've communicated what the document deficiencies are, and folks have been invoiced for those re-review fees for those missing documents. If you fail to submit and or comply with those requirements, and your modification record is deemed ineligible, your existing phase 2 temporary approval application may ultimately get deemed abandoned because you cannot move forward with it as currently submitted. So folks have been warned to, make sure that 1, their modification requests are something that can be considered by the department, and 2, to make sure that the record as it currently exists, all of the updated documents and forms have been submitted. In terms of ownership changes and entity substitutions, it is important that the applicant make sure that all of the necessary signatures are provided on all of the required forms. That is by far the thing that has held up most of those reviews, is because there's some type of signature deficiency that cannot be cured. And if owners decide later on that they don't want to move forward with it, or they're refusing to sign those documents, after we've requested that form in the corrected manner and 30 days have passed, that modification request may be deemed abandoned because of failure to submit the appropriate documents. The second thing is for the relocation. The staff that have been reviewing the business premises relocation requests have been communicating to folks whether or not their proposed business premises location is compliant. If you have a compliant location, it is in your best interest to start preparing your temporary approval documents for that new location, so that next week, when the new records are created, you'll be able to quickly populate those records and then pay any associated fees so that you can lock in your land use compliance on the new record. And then, of course, phase 2 records that don't comply with any of these requirements by September 30th shall be deemed abandoned under LAMC section 10403H. Again, all applicable payment, filing, and or document submission requirement deadlines still apply. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it back over to the director.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the thorough presentation. Part of what we wanted to be able to just emphasize today during the licensing report is one, the changes that have been made over time to try and streamline the process and reduce application processing timelines, the availability of new license types that we'll make available on October 1st, and putting into action the feedback that we've received from stakeholders regarding our licensing program. I just encourage both the commission and members of the public to continue to share feedback on the process. I think that folks will find that this updated process is reflective of what we've heard and what we've experienced thus far. And as I've shared earlier in the presentation, we're actively working on developing additional resources on the form of videos, information and procedure bulletins, planning several workshops that'll take place to go even further into detail about what's needed and to listen to stakeholders to get a sense of what they need to navigate through these processes. But I appreciate everyone's attention for this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clean, Ms. Packer. At this time, I want to open up the floor to my fellow commissioners for any questions or comments on the very robust presentation we just saw.
Commissioner On?
Yes, Commissioner Villa.
I have a few comments. First, I just want to say that I think it's great that DCR has been able to go through and streamline the processes. Obviously, a lot of thought and work has gone into it, and I hope that this will make everyone involved in the licensing process more successful, from the employees of DCR to those that are applying. The other thing I wanted to say is that I thought it was really important what Director Packer said in making sure and mention that those that are applying under the social equity program have legal resources available to them, especially if they're having some problems with getting their agreements, their equity share agreements, comment sheets being sent back to them. So I thought those two things were really important. And the third thing that I just quickly wanted to ask is, for those that are qualified, for those businesses that are qualified for renewal at 12/31/21, is DCR going to send them a reminder notice that they need of what needs to happen by 12/31 so that they can be in compliance again and are able to renew on at that point in time? Thank you, Commissioner On.
Thank you, Commissioner Villa, for the question. I'll direct the question about the renewal process to Jason, but want to articulate that we're going to be sending regular reminders to all of our applicants and licensees about their renewal requirements. We've set several reminders thus far. I'll use this as an opportunity to emphasize it's very important for our applicants and licensees to check their emails and to, if not you, have someone who you've delegated the responsibility to kind of manage the engagement responses with the department. But Jason, if you want to share any specific information about the different timelines associated with the renewal process, please feel free.
Thank you. So before changes that went into effect in February of this year, folks were required to renew their licenses between September 2nd and November 2nd of every year. And that was set by code. There were no late renewals that would be accepted after November 2nd. So September 2 to November 2 is the initial renewal period, and the basic renewal fees are assessed. We've already communicated who's eligible to submit those renewal applications. Folks that are getting temporary approval after September 2nd are getting notified that they're also eligible to renew for 2022. That'll happen on an ongoing basis. A reminder email will go out in October. And then after November 2nd, a new communication will go out to folks that have not timely submitted their renewal application, letting them know that they need to do so before the end of the calendar year because their license will expire at the end of the calendar year. They'll also be notified that since they didn't submit the renewal application during the basic renewal period, that their renewal application will be subject to the expedited services fee. And it's important to then get us that renewal as soon as possible so that we can fully review and process it before the end of the calendar year so that there's no break in their operation. And because we want to make sure that the records get reviewed in a timely manner and folks don't have the inability to operate, we will be having staff work evenings and weekends to facilitate any of those late renewals coming in. And then of course, at the end of December, if folks didn't timely renew, they'll get the notification that one, their 2021 license has expired. Two, they're not allowed to operate until a renewal application or new temporary approval application has been submitted and approved and issued temporary approval. And then 3, for folks that have things that are not currently available, they only have until the last day of February to submit the renewal application and have it be deemed submitted, and then pay the expedited services level 2 fee in order to basically secure their ability to have DCR consider their renewal. March 1st comes around, if a renewal has not been submitted late, they will be out of the process until they submit a new temporary approval record. And if they have a license for an activity that is not available or is not available to their particular applicant type, for instance, general applicants can't apply for retail storefronts. So if they lose their opportunity to submit a renewal, they're not going to be able to reapply for a retail storefront activity until January of 2025 at the earliest. So we will be sending out multiple communications. There are escalating fees associated with DCR trying to process these on an overtime basis to ensure that there's not a lapse in the licenses. And then of course, for folks that do allow their licenses to expire, they'll still have until the last day of February to submit their record and pay all of the applicable fees. But come March 1st, there is no opportunity to cure.
Thank you very much for that response. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Villa, is there anything else?
No, thank you. Those were the 3 points and the answers were very comprehensive. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Anyone else? We have Commissioner Mercado or Vice President Mason.
This is Commissioner Mercado. No questions, but again, just a comment and a thank for both presentations. And again, I would echo what my fellow commissioner said, that I think streamlining the process has been something that we've been hearing, and it's good to hear that it's actually been implemented.
Great.
Hi, it's Vice President Mason. I want to commend the department and the mayor's office and city council for being a part of this very necessary solution. This program should not be a barrier to entry for those desiring to do business in the industry in our city. And the changes that have been reported make us less of a barrier. So I'm happy to hear about that. I have one question, and that has to do with the potential to receive $22 million in state grant funds. Do we know when that application process will begin? When will it end? When will the funds be distributed?
Thank you, Vice President Mason. We're still in the process of working with the state to identify that information. Just earlier this week, we got a set of draft guidelines for what's called the Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grant Program. We're in the process of reviewing these draft guidelines right now. We have an opportunity to provide feedback back to the state by September 27th. So I've told my team, part of our homework this weekend is to look through all of these different materials. It's going to inform how the state kind of finalizes the actual development of the program. And I think we can assume that very shortly after they get this feedback, they're going to be releasing the actual application. I don't think that we're going to be in a situation where decisions are made about whether or not there's been a grant award, nor do I believe that we would have received funds during this calendar year. That's my assumption. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think that's just kind of the cadence that we've seen coming out of some of these programs. I am leading coordinated effort with city leadership to try and make sure that we can go after every single dollar that may be made available to us, but that also we can implement a plan that's going to allow us to put those dollars to work as soon as possible. There's very specific purposes of the grant program and how we can utilize those funds So we want to be efficient, but also innovative and find ways that we can still utilize those resources to promote equity. And so we're actively engaged with that. I can make sure Commissioner Mason at the Vice President Mason at the next commission meeting, we can give you an updated in this body, an updated report on any information that we've learned to date.
Thank you, Director Packer. I would appreciate that. And in your advocacy, I'm hoping that you all are lobbying for the removal of an expiration as to when the funds can be used, or at least pushing for an extension. In the past, we've seen that everything has been a year. It's been a year, and there have been obstacles, real life obstacles that have occurred over the past year that have somewhat hindered the department's ability to distribute some of the grants in a non-urgent fashion, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So I'm hoping that the state will be a little bit more generous in their use timeframes that they impose upon the grant funds this go around.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice President Mason. That's absolutely something that we're doing. I'm appreciative that even though this is one-time funding that would be available already, the terms essentially articulate that we would have at least 3 years to spend those dollars. So it's not a one-year term like some of the other equity grants that we've received to date and have successfully requested extensions. Nonetheless, we still want to move with urgency. It will be a process. It will be a multi-step process, but just making sure that we have a plan that's going to be efficient and that we can execute in as quick a fashion as possible, because the reality, Vice President Mason, is that the deadlines are going to come before the resources are available. And so we're going to have to be flexible and efficient. This is part of the very reason why we've made an effort to make efficiency in our temporary approval process right now, because we know we're going to have to layer on top of this process an annual licensing process that's, again, largely going to be driven by the state with their specific requirements. And so we're actively working with partners at the local and state level on this, but I appreciate your request for this information. We will follow up and provide a report at the next commission meeting.
And thank you, and congratulations to you and for having made it through this pivot. You guys are in a perpetual pivot, but this phase of your pivot, congratulations.
Thank you. Team effort.
Great. Yeah, I just want to again thank you for the team for all the hard work in terms of drafting, all of these amendments that we believe in. Frankly, I'm more hopeful than before. We've had other amendments than before, but just looking at all of the different changes that have been made, I think I fully expect and anticipate that as we start implementing and we start rolling in these changes, we're going to start seeing faster response times and faster issuances of these temporaries. There's at this point, frankly, for this commission, I don't think there's anything that's of a higher priority than making sure that we can get those 200 applicants, the issuance of the temporaries, and then ultimately get them operational. And so really want to thank you guys for your efforts, because I know there's a lot of moving parts. It's often not as simple as it may seem from the outside looking in. And I believe that these amendments will go a long way towards, expediting and streamlining the process, which is what I think all of us want to see. So thank you again for that. And as we continue on the process, we may get feedback from applicants, and let's just make sure that we're keeping tabs on some of the feedback and the comments. Sometimes as we start thinking about how we can make the system better, in practice there could be a different effect, right? So there's a theory and then there's the practice of it all. And the application. So let's just make sure we continue to stay engaged, make sure that we're monitoring the feedback and the comments as we continue to strive to get better and more efficient with our processes. With that, I want to move to The last item on our agenda, item number 4, this is the Social Equity Program report from the department. Is this going to be Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Hey, Dr. Brown, how are you?
Hello. Can folks see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'll just get right into the updates. Next slide, please. I always like to start with the mission statement, especially for those who are joining the commission meeting for the first time. The mission of the Social Equity Program is to promote equitable ownership and employment opportunities in the cannabis industry in order to decrease disparities in life outcomes for marginalized communities, and to address the disproportionate impacts of the war on drugs in those communities. Next slide. Our program benefits. This chart, we have application processing, business licensing and compliance, seed grant, and our pro bono services. Next slide, please. Now this chart shows the license types that are currently available to social equity applicants and those which will be available when our licensing portal has resumed operations on October 1st of 2021. Next slide. Next slide. I'll provide some updates on our business licensing and compliance program. And I'll give you a little history. I'd like to share the genesis of this program with the commissioners as to provide a little context of how we got here. In 2019, DCR was allocated $3 million for business licensing and compliance assistance. We issued our first bench of requests for qualifications on June 5th, and we received 21 proposals. We then issued our second bench of RFQs on November 20th of 2019 and received 7 proposals. Our contracting process was temporarily halted by the mayor's June 24th City of LA cost containment measures. Now, this was implemented in response to the budget deficit brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thankfully, we were able to resume in September of 2020 by signing contracts with 5 vendors for the Business Licensing and Compliance Program initiative. Work began in May of 2021 and has continued throughout the summer to deliver the launch of our first programming on August 21st of 2021. Next slide. As you may remember from our last presentation last month, the department selected 5 vendors to assist with the launch of our BLC program. They are North Star Alliances, Oaksterdam University, Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches, Wadeco Business Center, and High Demand Development. I will now provide a short overview of their accomplishments from this summer. Next slide. General Business and Development Services scope of work. Our vendors have created pre-recorded videos, digital assets, and general curricula on topics including accounting and sales forecasting, payroll practices, insurance and financial planning, excuse me. These videos and additional materials will be available on our online learning management system, or LMS. Next slide. Deliverables. As part of this engagement, our vendors have spearheaded direct contact and have promoted campaigns with social equity applicants, notifying them of upcoming programming through calls, texts, and emails. Examples include the Grow 2021 Career Fair that had over 600 registrants. We had a 3-night LA Cannabis Tech Week, and our September webinar series with 7 live webinars on cannabis business operations. Next slide. We have a cannabis technology business development scope of work. And now under this scope, our vendors have created online curricula and other materials to assist applicants with integrating technology into their commercial business, cannabis businesses. Topics include cultivation technology, testing lab technology, blockchain technology, app and general business technology, and standard operating procedures technology integration. Next slide. We had a Cannabis Tech Week. This is just a snapshot of the flyer that went out. It was a fabulous 3-night tech week. We had experts across cannabis technology services, and they joined us, as I said, for the 3 days, the 24th, 25th, and 26th. We had a fantastic response, and we learned a lot, all of us. The next slide, please. Our next scope of work is workforce development, job outreach, and job placement services. Vendors in this scope are providing vocational training, work experience, and internships in the cannabis industry. They are also offering career guidance and strategies, helping social equity applicants and workers with job development and job placement. They are also helping workers explain and explore alternative opportunities in ancillary industries. Next slide. On August 21st, we held our inaugural Cannabis Virtual Career Fair with over 600 registrants. Attendees heard from experts across the industry on all aspects of the cannabis commercial market and best practices for finding opportunities. It was from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it was wonderful. I wish everybody had a chance to experience it. And as I said, it was our inaugural, and we're going to do this every year or maybe twice a year. Next slide, please. I also wanted to let everyone know that the Career Fair also highlighted the launch of DCR's Job Board, which connects cannabis businesses with interested employees and the city of LA. Further activity in this scope will include the creation of an ecosystem, allowing participants and operators to network with each other and work together. Next slide. Our data collection and reporting scope. Now, under this scope, our vendor is creating a customer relationship management system, or CRM, that will allow us to analyze, track, and advise, and standardize reporting on all aspects of the social equity program. The CRM, combined with targeted surveys, will allow us to use data reporting to hone in on the best practices in programming for our social equity applicants, while also identifying roadblocks to their success. Next slide. And finally, I'd like to remind everybody about our ongoing September webinar series. These live webinars are covering essential topics for opening and operating a compliant cannabis business. Topics include inventory management, security requirements, accounting, marketing and branding, payroll records, and retention and insurance. As a matter of fact, we are having our accounting webinar tonight from 6 to 7:30. So please, folks, who's ever listening, you can access the login on our website. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to provide us an update on our SEED grant program, which did close on August 18th. Next slide. And just to give a little background, in April of 2021, the City of Los Angeles established the Social Equity Entrepreneur Development Grant, which is the acronym for SEED. The SEED grant program utilizes funding from the Cannabis Equity Grant for Local Jurisdictions, or the CEG grant, to provide financial assistance to verified social equity individual applicants. To date, the City of LA has dedicated $6 million towards SEED, $5 million available for SEED 1.0, and $1 million available for SEED 2.0. Now, the application period opened on April 20th, 4/20, and the application period closed on August 18th. Next slide, please. The SEED grant program is administered in partnership with Elevate Impact LA. SEED 1.0 will utilize $5 million of the 6 in the SEG funding to provide $25,000 to all qualified Phase 3 Retail Round 1 individual applicants. Now, as a reminder, the list of Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants can be found on our website under the Social Equity Program application processing page. Next slide. SEED 2.0 will utilize $1 million of the $6 million to provide grants up to $10,000 each to verify social equity individual applicant in 2 disbursements. They are eligible to receive 5K disbursement when the Department of Cannabis Regulation deems their pre-application eligible for further processing. And then they can receive an additional 5,000 when they have received a notice of local compliance underway. Please note that meeting these requirements is a must in order to receive funding under C 2.0. Next slide. The department conducted an extensive outreach campaign to individual equity applicants, notifying them of their eligibility for the seed grant. We sent out 27 e-blasts. We had 4 lunch and learn webinars to assist applicants with completing the application. We had 4 rounds of email invitations to cannabis trade organization, encouraging their membership to participate in the lunch and learns. We did 3 texting campaigns. We have 3 application tutorials on our website on instructions of how to complete a successful application. And we did 2 rounds of phone bankings, and we called individual applicants. Next slide, please. And to give you an application status, we have a total of 211 Seed 1.0 who have applied. We have 149 who completed applications. Out of that 149, 81 have approved applications. And out of that 81, 58 have received grant dollars. We have dispersed $1,450,000 to seed grant folks as of yesterday. Next slide, please. For Seed 2.0, we have 97 people who applied. Out of that 97, 68 have completed applications. Out of the 68, 28 have approved applications. And out of the 28, 18 have received grant funds for a total of $130,000. Next slide, please. Now, any remaining funds that are not awarded by 90 days prior to the end of the city's agreement with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development will be dispersed on a pro rata basis to applicants who applied by the deadline and who are eligible for grant funds. Now, any remaining 1.0 funds from the 5 million will be divided among eligible applicants, and any remaining 2.0 funds from the $1 million will be divided among the eligible 2.0 applicants. Next slide, please. The deadline is October 14th. That is the last day for applicants to complete their application and achieve approved applicant status. Now, anyone who has not become approved by October 14th will not be eligible to move forward with the pro rata disbursement process. Again, pro rata distributions will only apply to those who are approved applicants. Eligible applicants will be notified and must agree to accept pro rata funds. Pro rata distributions will be made no later than November 19th. Again, November 19th, 2021. And now I'll move forward. Next slide, please. With our pro bono legal assistance program, we're in partnership with the LA County Bar Association, and we're continuing to match qualified social equity individual applicants with their pro bono legal panel. If you're interested, please sign up on our website under the Social Equity Program's Benefits and Resources, Pro Bono Legal Services. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the where it is on our, it's a snapshot of the screen and where you can find it on our website. As you can see, all you need to do is click here for the Pro Bono Legal Services Survey, and then click for the authorization agreement. It's 2 simple forms. You upload that, and that will allow us to provide LACBO with your information and your concerns. This is a very beneficial free resource for Phase 3 Retail Round 1 folks, especially as they're going through their equity share document review. So we really encourage people to take advantage of this free resource. And with that, I will turn it back over to Director Packard. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Appreciate you sharing our social equity program report. I'm really excited about all of the programming that Dr. Brown and her team have been leading over the course of the summer. The virtual cannabis career fair was extremely exciting. There were tons of subject matter experts that were able to participate and learn. A lot of collaborative, thoughtful discussion and just real conversation from folks actually navigating through the process, trying to share information, resources with the larger community, to Tech Week and this September webinar series and all of the programming that I know that we're working on that's coming down the pipeline. I just want to say thank you to you, Dr. Brown, and to the folks who work up under your leadership. I know that there's been frustration both externally and internally in the fact that there's been a level of service and a level of resources that we've wanted to and needed to be able to provide to our stakeholders, but have had to gone through this process where first we establish the policy, then sometimes later we get resources, and then we do what we do, and that's go to work. And we've been going to work in partnership with these vendors and in collaboration with the rest of the team. And so I'm really looking forward to coming back to this commission and just continuing to share updates specifically that are coming out of our business licensing and compliance assistance program. This is being made available because of the first set of resources that the city dedicated to this program. I want to remind folks that even though we passed our program in 2017, we didn't have resources for business licensing and compliance assistance until 2019. And Dr. Brown did an excellent job of kind of walking folks through the history and process that it's been for us to kind of get dollars and put those dollars into action. But from this point on, and this process has already started, you are going to continue to see high-level programming come out of this department and be made available to applicants in a timely fashion. And it's going beyond licensing to the specific business development and workforce development that was promised. And so we know that we're catching up, but Dr. Brown and her team and this team is hard at work. And so I hope this body and members of the public are again kind of seeing their feedback reflected, and then also just our commitment to addressing that feedback reflected in the programming and policies that you're seeing today. That'll conclude item number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becker, and special thank you to Dr. Brown and her team for putting this together. A lot of timely updates, and I want to just open it up to the commissioners now for any comment or questions.
Vice President On, this is Commissioner Villa. I just wanted to thank Dr. Brown. I was happy to see an increase in the number of the grants that have gotten out and to see the efforts that they've made to increase that. I do appreciate that. Was a comment that I had at a prior meeting, and I'm really grateful for the work that they've done in getting this done. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Vice President Mason. Dr. Brown, how many social equity applicants have been approved or received their temporary approvals at this point?
I will turn that over to Jason to give you the update on how many temporary approvals have been issued. It changes every day. Jason, do you have the updated information for Vice President Mason?
Yeah, 19 of the phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, which have already gone through the equity share review, have received their temporary approvals. And we have approximately 120 phase 2 businesses that are associated with a verified social equity tier 1 or tier 2 applicant that have received temporary approval, but those folks have not yet gone through the equity share review. And as part of their 2022 renewal applications, they're submitting all of their equity share renewal documents. So we will be vetting them as part of the 2022 licensure process. So approximately 140 of our licensees are bona fide social equity individual applicants. 20 have gone through equity share review, and about 120 will go through it as part of their 2022 renewal.
Thank you, Jason. So we're moving right along. It's good to hear that, like I've said earlier, the progress is finally being made and we're seeing things being realized. And so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just really good to see some significant movement. You know, the social equity program is so critical to our collective success, especially here in Los Angeles, the largest, legal cannabis market, in the world, really. And so it's so critical that we get this up and running. And it's not just about having a social equity program, but it's got to be one that's meaningful and works for the people that need it the most. And I believe that we are headed in that direction. And Dr. Brown and the team, and however this commission can support those endeavors, please continue to keep us informed and let us know how we can best support you. And if there's nothing else at this time, I'd like to go ahead and thank everyone for your participation. I want to thank everyone listening in and viewing at home. And with that, I'll adjourn this meeting. The time now is 5:18. Thank you.